After the short but memorable dive into Eraserhead's past and the tragic loss of Shirakumo that changed his life forever, we now return to the Vigilante story.
Yes!
Get ready for unexpected plot twists, intense action, and even a bit of romance in this next arc. With number 6 still on the loose, what kind of scheme is he planning this time? Let's find out. In the next scene, two villains appeared in the city, one resembling a rhino and the other a horse. The rhino person was sarcastically feeling offended that a female student screamed when she bumped into them. The horse villain called the rhino villain boss and commented that he thought the girl had broken his arm. The rhino villain replied that that wouldn't be good, considering how fragile and feeble people like them were. He then demanded payment from the girls as compensation for his supposedly broken arm, while the horse villain intimidated nearby bystanders by kicking a trash bin and yelling at them for staring. The rhino villain grabbed one of the girls by the arm and said that police and heroes didn't usually come around this area. He added that no one would help them in these back streets, so they should just hand over what they had. One of the girls spoke up, saying she knew someone who might show up if they called him, someone who sometimes passed by near Narahata Station. She pointed out that he was sort of a hero, which helped her friend realize exactly who she was referring to. Mocking them, the villains asked if they seriously believed in some so-called legendary savior in this place, calling it nonsense and asking if the girls really believed such a thing. The two students then began shouting the name, the Crawler, and it wasn't long before Koichi quickly slid and glided into the scene. It was then explained to us that this marked another day in Narahata, where at least one or two nasty villains always seemed to show up. Koichi wondered aloud why they suddenly appeared and suggested that maybe the villains lived nearby. Still, he noted, Narahata always had the Crawler. Koichi then leapt into action and drew everyone's attention, startling both villains and the students. It was added that since Koichi lived here, he was often just hanging out in the area. As usual, Koichi clung to a wall and introduced himself as the guy who loves it when people gets his name right, the Crawler. The two villains were clearly surprised that he actually showed up. Annoyed, Koichi commented that all this time, they kept calling him the wrong name. The villains insulted him, calling him a creepy little cockroach in a lame hoodie, and Koichi agreed, saying that's what people did call him. As he continued speaking, the two villains attempted to punch him, but he easily dodged everything they threw his way. He added that over time, as he kept working steadily and doing a good job, more and more people were starting to give him credit for it. That's when Pop Step entered the scene and, irritated, scolded him for not focusing on the fight, while the civilians nearby began cheering for him, still calling him Crawler. The two villains grew increasingly agitated, thinking Koichi was just playing around with them. They tried to attack him simultaneously with punches and kicks, but Koichi skillfully avoided them by flipping through the air. Upon landing, he struck a stance to prepare for his projectile attacks. He used his signature shooty go blam slap style on the villains, firing off small, concentrated air pressure projectiles at their bodies. The two tried to get close, but the barrage was too much, they couldn't reach him. Then Koichi crouched and hit both villains in their stomachs with slightly stronger air pressure blasts. He called this attack the double shooty go blam. As the two villains fell, Koichi immediately tied them up. Pop Step asked how he planned to explain this to the police, but Koichi said that since no one was hurt, he figured they were good to go. However, because Koichi had let his guard down, he didn't expect the villains to break free so easily. The rhino villain managed to grab him by the collar and yank him roughly, showing his frustration. We could see the panic on Koichi's face, until Kamayan and Ikejiro suddenly arrived and took care of the villains, shocking Pop Step. Kamayan, irritated, confronted the rhino villain and said he didn't look like someone with good intentions in their neighborhood. The villain, confused, asked who they even were. Ikejiro then introduced themselves, saying they came from a place known for featuring big and tall gentlemen and the cutest kitty cats, Hopper's Cafe, located in East Narahata. He also mentioned that he worked there, and the person with them, Teruo, was one of their part-timers. Kamayan introduced himself as the manager. Kamayan added that he knew people like these two villains all too well. He said they were crude, poor, and unfulfilled, which was why they wandered around the world causing trouble. Ikejiro, however, gently reminded him not to be prejudiced. Kamayan then pointed out to the villains that if they didn't want to get caught by the police, they should just get a job and stick to the straight and narrow. He suddenly brought up that their cafe was hiring for a dishwasher position and mentioned that the job started at 650 yen per hour, plus free meals. Next, he told Koichi that these two villains were actually their newest hires, and as Ikejiro put it, they're all in this together. One of the guys nearby asked in disbelief if Kamayan really called that kind of pay a living wage, to which someone else replied that it was just casual work anyway. After that, Pop Step told Koichi that he should probably get going since he still had an interview scheduled that afternoon. Koichi immediately remembered and apologized before saying goodbye to the two female students he had saved. Before he could leave, the two girls shyly asked if they could take a photo with him. He happily agreed, and they asked Ikejiro to take the picture. Pop Step, watching them, reminded him to hurry or he'd be late. Pop Step was caught off guard when Koichi suddenly asked if she wanted to come along with them. Not long after, she cheerfully agreed to join. They ran into Jubei and Samazu, and after getting a group photo together, everyone joined in as Ikejiro took a selfie with all of them. The scene then transitioned to the building where Koichi's interview was being held. The company had set up their temporary interview room inside a utility closet. Inside, the interviewer/boss explained to Koichi that they weren't really looking to hire any fancy college graduates. He said it was an on-site cleaning job, difficult and literally dirty work. He asked if Koichi was okay with that, while his female assistant looked visibly nervous, trying to politely nudge her boss to tone down the way he was explaining things. Koichi answered that it was fine. He said he sometimes even picked up trash or cleaned drains just for fun. The boss looked surprised and commented that Koichi was quite the oddball, while his secretary became even more uncomfortable with his words. They then moved on to the next question. If Koichi had any say in it, what would he say was the most valuable thing he got out of his years as a student? Koichi thought for a moment and replied that he'd done a lot of local volunteering, so the most valuable things he got were the experiences and the friendships he formed from that time. After that, the scene shifted to Koichi's home, where he was sewing up his All Might hoodie. He told Pop Step that he felt his interview had gone well, and Pop Step replied that she hoped they would call him back. Koichi explained that while the company was small, the boss seemed decent. Still, he said he'd be happy working anywhere that wanted to hire him. That made Pop Step wonder out loud if he was really okay with choosing a job that way, and asked if he didn't have any big dreams for his future. Koichi paused for a second, then replied that in his opinion, he had already achieved his dreams. For a little over 3 years, he said, he'd been able to play the role of a hero in their town. Every day was fun, and he knew the people were grateful. He added that fortunately, he had never been arrested by the police, and Pop Step remarked that it was like he was just living by the seat of his pants. Koichi continued, saying that it felt like he'd already done everything he dreamed of as a kid. Now, all that was left was to find a decent job so he could put food on the table and keep his family from worrying. Pop Step jokingly asked if those words really came from him, because they actually sounded kind of legit. A little later, Koichi finally finished stitching up his All Might hoodie. As he folded it, he said that it was pretty worn out at this point. Because of that, he decided to finally use his last new hoodie, a limited variant in a special dark color. Pop Step blushed a little and commented that in just 3 years, he'd already gone through his entire hoodie collection, no matter how carefully he had taken care of them. Koichi turned to her and corrected her, saying that he had still taken good care of them, which is why she shouldn't throw them away. She quickly replied that she would never even think of doing that. As he continued getting dressed, Koichi said that once he starts working, he won't have any business acting like a hero anymore. So if this hoodie gets worn out too, maybe that'll be the time for him to retire as the crawler. Looking at himself in the mirror, he smiled, feeling that it really suited him well. Pop Step was caught off guard when she heard him talking about retiring. She couldn't seem to sit still after that. He suddenly called out to her, which made Pop Step nervously ask what was going on, her voice stuttering a little. With a cheerful smile, Koichi asked if she wanted to join him on patrol. He excitedly added that he still needed to test out his new hoodie, to which Pop Step agreed and said to let her get ready. However, when he invited her again to head out, she shouted back that she just said she needed a moment. After that, as Koichi and Pop Step began patrolling the area, Koichi started narrating to us that, well, A lot had happened during his years of living in Narahata. Looking back, everything had been so fun, even if he never expected that his youth would end with such a grand and happy conclusion. But, he added, that wasn't the end of the story yet, because it was during the summer of his senior year that the final season of The Crawler would begin. In the next scene, we suddenly shift to a guest appearance by Makoto on Right Now TV, which was being broadcast across America and all over the world. This time, she sported a new getup with cool shades. The host introduced Makoto as a woman of many talents and the general manager of CC Corporation, to which Makoto cheerfully replied that she was glad to be there. The reporter shared that some consider her the brains behind Captain Celebrity's comeback, having handled his marketing after his blacklisting in America. However, the reporter quickly corrected himself, clarifying that what he actually meant was the hero's sabbatical in Japan. He then explained that while studying at Marvelous Central University in New York, she defended a thesis titled Vigilantism versus Commercialism, breaking down the pillars that prop up hero society. He said that paper was like a stone thrown into the calm waters of hero sociology, sparking serious ripples in what was already a heated academic topic. He added that its book adaptation became an international bestseller just past spring. He also described her as a scholar at the forefront of hero society, dubbed the Woman of the Hour. However, according to the host, some authorities claimed that from an academic perspective, it was unfair for her to write about hero society while also marketing a real-life hero. He asked how she would respond to such criticism. Makoto replied that she had no objection to that point. According to her, as they already said, she really does have her feet on the ground in the hero industry, and strictly speaking, she's not a pure academic. But if there's one thing she could add, her answer would simply be so what. She went on to explain that no one is exempt from the biases brought by the era they were raised in or their socioeconomic background. Even scholars aren't exempt, she said, and that's why all their theories and writings are made public, for scrutiny and critique. As for the validity of the societal model she proposed, she said that, along with how modern society chooses to live, is something that researchers 50 or even 100 years from now will be the ones to debate and evaluate. And she's proud that she was able to present her ideas with that kind of long-term thinking in mind. She added that whatever happens next will be up to the next generation, because that's just how the world works. But even if she could leave behind just the tiniest trace in the history of sociology, she said, that would be a tremendous honor for her. The host accepted her answer and commented that it sounds like she has already achieved what she set out to do, and that her unshakable confidence came through loud and clear. After that, the host said that after the break, they'd be sharing commentary from all corners of American society about the Makoto sensation. So, he reminded the audience not to change the channel. They'll be back shortly for more coverage on Right Now TV. It turns out that Pop Step and the other members of the Featherhats were watching that broadcast. Pop Step was clearly impressed by Makoto and commented that she really was something else as she was already a global sensation, while Miyu couldn't believe that someone like her had just been casually wandering around their town over the past few years, to which you agreed. After that, Pop Step began their meeting about their little neighborhood. We then moved to the rooftop of the Americana department store. While showing scenes from their previous event, Pop Step commented that it didn't really draw much of an audience. She added that Americana had been continuously slashing their budget and even told them to reduce the number of events held each month. So today, they needed to put their heads together and brainstorm ways to boost attendance. You asked if they had already reached out to Samazu and the others. Miyu, referring to them as their cheer squad, said it's been hard to get them to join lately since most of them are either working or in school now. The three sisters then suggested that maybe some intense training would be enough to pull them out of this slump. Miyu then asked if the dance club they started at St. Lila's had already begun joining competitions, which led you to comment that it looked like the president of the dance squad's lessons were really starting to pay off. Miyu then brought up the president and casually mentioned that the band leader was still her boyfriend, noting that the two had been steady for quite a while. You, blushing, chimed in that that kind of commitment is lovely, while Pop Step told them to get the conversation back on track. Miyu apologized and said she had to leave early since she had a date, and she needed to head out now. She said she'd decided that she really had to find a boyfriend while still in high school, to which Pop Step asked her to take it seriously. Speaking of love life, Miyu suddenly asked how things were going between her and Koichi. That made her flinch and blush, stammering that she wasn't sure what Miyu meant by that or why she was even asking. Mu pointed out that if she didn't make a move, Koichi might move on. That left her confused, asking what move on even meant. Only for Miyu to say she obviously knew what it meant, while you scolded Miyu again. She then pointed out that, but they were all on their own paths now, and Koichi has a proper job already. A year from now, their lives will probably be completely different. So you advised her to start thinking about how close she and Koichi would be when that time comes. Pop Step fell completely silent, embarrassed at the thought, especially when she remembered how she reacted when she found out Koichi was planning to retire as the crawler. To change the topic, she loudly declared that this wasn't on the agenda for today's meeting. You agreed and apologized. Just then, they heard someone running toward the room. A moment later, a guy stormed in, clearly flustered and apologizing for being late. He asked if they had already started the meeting, and it turned out he was the new manager who replaced Makoto. Pop Step explained that they were just brainstorming ways to boost attendance and turn around their current situation. But the manager looked disappointed as he revealed that the decision had already been made in the upstairs meeting, that next month's Nerafest would be the final one. That left everyone completely stunned. He immediately apologized, saying he failed to sway the decision. Pop Step said it was okay, but Miyu bluntly pointed out that the guy had only just taken over as their manager, so this was a losing battle from the start, to which he tried to stop her again. Miyu added that in the end, it was amazing Makoto who stitched everything together, and they just rode along as amateurs. Still, she said it had been a fun experience, so she wasn't complaining. But maybe this was a good time to call it. She then said her goodbyes, telling everyone they'd see each other again at next week's meeting. Pop Step and the others silently watched her leave. Trying to cheer everyone up, the manager said that since this would be their final show, they should at least end it with something great, so they might as well start brainstorming again. He even offered to buy them pizza as a consolation, but you apologized and suggested they just think of ideas for the final show as homework for the week. She also had cram school after this, and the three sisters said they had their dance club too. The manager fell silent and muttered that it was a shame, just as the pizza place he had called finally picked up the phone. Pop Step then said she'd be heading home too, catching the manager's attention. As she was walking out, the manager encouraged her, telling her she could do it and to keep fighting until the end. She simply nodded. In the next scene, Pop Step was seen walking slowly, looking downcast. In her mind, it's not like she thought that things would never change, but she imagined the endings and goodbyes to come later than this. Now, she saw herself as totally unprepared for any of it. She remembered what Miyu had said, that Koichi might move on if she didn't act, and that made her feel even worse. She passed by Supermarket Munigia and decided to stop in. While shopping, she thought to herself that it didn't necessarily mean she'd start seriously cooking for Koichi. The meeting just ended early, and she had nothing else to do. Still, she figured she could at least cook curry, as she grabbed a box of ready mix off the shelf. It shouldn't be a problem, she thought. She let out a sigh afterward and once again questioned herself about the excuses she was making. Besides that, she added that she didn't need any special reason anyway. Koichi always cooked for her back at his place, so it only felt natural to return the favor once in a while. And if she ever felt the urge to cook more often in the future, then why not? When she arrived at Koichi's house, she happily stepped inside, ready to announce that curry would be their dinner. But her plan was immediately shattered when she saw Makoto already cooking. She wondered why Makoto was there, and the latter explained that she returned for a short visit, so she decided to drop by. Koichi, clearly excited, chimed in to say that Makoto was cooking curry for them, which made Makoto explain that she had recently become obsessed with spices. Pop Step felt embarrassed and quickly tried to hide the groceries she had brought, awkwardly saying that Makoto's curry looks real legit. Not long after, Makoto finished cooking, and Pop Step commented that it was like something served at a restaurant. Upon tasting it, she noted that it was pretty spicy but still incredibly delicious. Makoto, meanwhile, started sweating and admitted that the spiciness would definitely hit hard. She then asked Koichi how it was, and the moment he took a bite, his eyes widened and his whole face turned red. Worried, Makoto asked if he had never really liked spicy food. Pop Step immediately fetched him some ice water while Koichi laid down to recover. Makoto quickly apologized and explained that she only made curry because Koichi had said he liked it. Pop Step agreed and explained that Koichi was into curry the same way guys like him typically enjoy curry, hamburgers, and all that. That made Makoto realize that he's one of those type of guys. After they finished eating, Pop Step pointed out that Makoto had mentioned she just dropped by, but asked if there was any special reason she came back to Japan. Makoto replied that she was preparing for her official homecoming. Pop Step asked what she meant by that, and Makoto explained that she had already done everything she could in the States and was now considering what to do next here at home. Pop Step countered that she had seen her making waves in the US on TV, but Makoto brushed it off, saying most of that was just for show and to sell a few more books. She said everything was going smoothly with her boss and work now, so she planned to delegate her managerial duties to someone competent and trustworthy. That way, she could finally focus on what she really wanted to do next. Suddenly, she asked how Nerifest was doing, which caught Pop Step off guard. Makoto explained that she wanted to check on things, but since Marikana had taken over operations, she felt she shouldn't interfere, so she apologized for that. Just as Pop Step was about to explain their situation, Koichi jumped in with a cheerful tone and said that everything was going well and running smoothly. Pop Step had no choice but to agree, saying they were managing one way or another. After that, she decided to leave, saying she had something else to attend to. Koichi asked if that was really the case, while Makoto commented that it's too bad, but said that keeping busy is good. She also asked Pop to tell everyone that she said hi. Pop Step then walked out the door and looked at the groceries she had bought earlier. After staring for a moment, she began walking away slowly, only to stop again after a few steps. Frustrated with herself, she called herself an idiot for putting on a front instead of telling the truth. She tried to convince herself to go back inside, to just say what was really happening with Nerifest, thinking that maybe if she told them, Makoto could help fix everything the way she always did. However, when she came back and peeked through the door, her eyes widened in shock as she saw Koichi and Makoto hugging and seemingly enjoying the moment, leaving her frozen in place and overwhelmed with concern. After that, Pop Step peeked through the window again and saw that Koichi was blushing because Makoto hugged him. It turned out it was just an accident, as Koichi apologized. He said his legs were still a bit shaky and his stomach was still growling, to which Makoto replied that he shouldn't sweat it and she'll welcome him with open arms anytime. Blushing, he wondered what she meant by that, and Makoto said that what she said was exactly what she meant. When she mentioned that maybe he should head to the restroom first, Koichi immediately ran over there. A few moments later, while drinking tea, Makoto said she had been thinking about what's next for her future, and how she wants to live. She said she wanted Koichi to think about it seriously with her, if he was willing. Koichi then asked if she was talking about work, like getting him into Captain Celebrity's company, but she immediately denied that and explained that she wouldn't approach him for something like that. Her cheeks started to blush as she said it was something more personal, about family, about life, and about relationships. Koichi also blushed because they were now talking about lovey-dovey stuff, and he brought up that didn't Makoto already know a lot of rich and famous people now, including pro heroes, so he commented that he wasn't sure what she could learn from a plain guy like him. Makoto replied that there's nothing wrong with being ordinary. She explained that, honestly, she has no idea where life would take her 5 or 10 years from now. She said she might become fabulously successful or end up in trouble and lose everything. She emphasized that everything could change in an instant, depending on how society and the people around her receive her. That's why she tried imagining what her future might look like. And no matter what position she ends up in, the one she sees there is Koichi, always smiling. She explained that she needed someone constant like Koichi in her life. Koichi was now staring at her and said that he understood. Then Makoto said the reason she chose him was because as long as she had someone ordinary by her side, she knew she could go anywhere and achieve anything. That's why Koichi was the best partner, no doubt about it. Koichi smiled again at that, and not long after, once he realized what Makoto was actually saying, he screamed loudly and started blushing intensely while panicking and asking why it had to be him, to which Makoto pointed out that she had just explained why. Koichi said she really caught him off guard, so Makoto told him she's coming home for good this fall, and if he wanted, he could give her his answer then. Koichi felt a little shy since she was giving him so much time to think about it, and he awkwardly said he didn't really have a reason to refuse, but Makoto pushed him to think about it properly. Koichi asked why, and Makoto fell silent, disappointed by how slow he was. She sighed and decided to just be straightforward with what she wanted to say to Koichi. She asked him how things have been between him and Pop Step lately, which confused him again. He answered that things were pretty much the same as always, and that they weren't in that kind of relationship, to which Makoto pointed out, does he really think Pop Step would come over to a guy's place and have dinner if she didn't like him? Koichi replied that he wasn't saying Pop Step hated him, but every time love or anything like that came up, she always looked like she wasn't happy about it. Makoto understood what he meant and thought that maybe they had spent so much time together that it made talking about these kinds of things difficult. But she added that it still matters, and she advised Koichi not to decide anything until he fully understood how both he and Pop Step felt about it. Koichi commented that she seemed to be overly cautious or overly considerate, to which Makoto replied that it was only because she was fond of Pop Step too. She said she wouldn't want to jump into anything unless everyone was on board. Not long after, Koichi agreed to ask Pop Step about it, and Makoto suggested maybe he should do it indirectly, which he agreed with. After that conversation, Makoto left, and as she said her goodbyes, she wished Koichi good luck with his fact-finding. Koichi, thrilled, shut the door after Makoto left, then jumped and shouted with excitement. Meanwhile, Makoto felt a sense of relief that they were finally able to talk things through. She said she might have handed the decision over to Koichi and Pop Step. She wanted to say she'd be satisfied with whatever the conclusion was, but she just laughed and said her heart was pounding. While she was stretching, Pop Step was secretly watching her from the edge of the penthouse, clearly flustered and overwhelmed by everything she was feeling in that moment. The next day, Koichi happily approached Pop Step and tried to bring up the conversation he had with Makoto the day before, but she just yelled at him in irritation, asking if he couldn't see she was busy. Koichi scratched his head and said he'd wait for later. That afternoon, he tried to talk to her again, but she quickly ran away and told Koichi to save it for another time. Then in the evening, as Koichi was about to speak, she suddenly screamed at him like a cat whose tail had been stepped on. Koichi immediately understood and simply apologized. When Pop Step got home, she buried herself under her blanket and let out a scream of frustration. Flustered, she said she kept running away, but it didn't take long before she told herself that running wouldn't solve anything. She began writing, thinking that she needed to organize her thoughts and tell Koichi how she felt. As she wrote, she imagined how she would confess everything to Koichi in her letter. She pointed out to Koichi that he's an oblivious blockhead, so he probably hadn't even realized she liked him this whole time. She knew that Makoto was a beautiful and stylish woman with a great body. She was also smart and sensible. She had money, popularity, lots of connections, and the energy and drive to accomplish anything. But when she was about to say her buts about all of that, she paused and wondered what it actually was. She tried comparing herself to Makoto and commented that in every aspect, Makoto was better. She explained that over the past 3 years, she had devoted most of her free time to Nerifest. That earned her props from a lot of people, and she genuinely enjoyed rehearsing and hanging out with Miyu, Yu, and all of their friends. Even so, it was Makoto who had set the stage for all of that, and she couldn't truly claim ownership over any of it. When she thought about that, she realized that maybe Makoto didn't actually get credit for everything after all. She was the one who thought of creating Pop Step in the first place, but then she wondered, is that really all she's worth? While browsing through her laptop, she saw a few clips of her early days from 3 to 5 years ago and commented that apparently someone had recorded those. She decided to watch them, but not long after, she started cringing. She blushed hard and thought it was really difficult to watch. She said she was just a little kid back then, wandering around while cosplaying for fun. She'd stand on some ledge somewhere and start singing parody songs using a toy mic. She really felt like she sucked during those times. She wished she could just delete that dumb part of her past. Then suddenly, something in the video caught her attention. Someone in the video asked her what her name was. Smiling and shy, she said to call her Pop Step, and that she was the one who came up with the name. She said she would do her best and thanked everyone for their support. It turned out that the person who asked her name was Samazu, and he shouted that he would cheer her on all the way to the end. She started to reflect after watching the video and realized that what she had been thinking was right. she needed to cheer for herself too. Despite everything she had started, she still hadn't really accomplished anything. But now, she was cheering herself on, so she knew she couldn't afford to lose here. Tears began to well up in her eyes as she came to this realization, and she pushed forward with renewed determination. In the next scene, we move to a meeting at the Americana department store, where their manager explained that since there won't be any shows in July, they'll have extra time to prepare for one final spectacular during summer break. He also mentioned that the people upstairs have already approved the schedule. As for the specifics of the plan, he asked if they could get a recap from their last meeting, prompting you to stand up. She began explaining that the centerpiece of this final show would be the grand finale. They were trying to reach out to early members, special guests, and everyone who had joined them on stage so they could wrap it up with a group song, a video of past highlights, and messages for everyone. As their manager said they'd be incorporating that into the overall plan, Pop Step suddenly arrived and apologized for being late. Bluntly, Miyu pointed out that she was making a habit of that, to which Pop Step apologized again. You then asked if she had been busy since she looked tired, and Pop Step answered yes, explaining that she hadn't gotten much sleep last night, while Miyu just stared at her. Mio then pointed out that she had been working on something and sneakingly lately, which made Pop Step nervous as she tried to explain that she wouldn't exactly call it sneaking. But before she could continue her explanation, you came to the rescue, saying that what her sister meant was it was clear Pop Step had been working hard on something. So was there any way they could help? Pop Step thanked her, but explained that it was something she needed to do on her own, for now. Next, she asked their manager if any decisions had been made. After several hours of discussion, the scene suddenly shifts to Pop Step's home. As soon as she got back, she freshened up and then immediately put on the all-night hoodie Koichi had given her, returning to the thing that had been keeping her busy. The next day, she headed out, where we see her struggling to pull her heavy luggage bag. She took a train headed somewhere, and once she arrived at her destination, she began setting up equipment typically used by a busker. After adjusting her mixed sound, she started singing while people walked past in front of her. Suddenly, 3 guys approached her, clearly not up to anything good, and one of them asked what she was doing. She looked puzzled and said she was singing, to which the guy asked again if that was so, and was she doing it because she lost a bet. His companion commented that he was being harsh, and they laughed. They began harassing her, asking if she had a permit to perform there, and she said she didn't know she needed one. One of them said ignorance wasn't an excuse, and that in these streets, she needed to buy a permit from him first. His friend laughed again, while nearby bystanders began to look worried for Pop Step. Then she heard a familiar voice politely asking the crowd to make way, so she turned around, and it turned out to be their manager from Americana department store. He quickly stepped in front of her and explained that he was responsible for her, so if these guys had any issues, they should take it up with him instead. The spiky-haired guy asked who he was, so he pulled out a business card and introduced himself as Nomura from Americana department store. The guy asked what a corporate suit had to do with Pop Step, so Nomura pointed to the part of the card that read Event Planning Office and said he was part of the entertainment department. Not long after, a few police officers arrived on the scene and asked what the problem was, which distracted the guys harassing her. Nomura quickly pushed Pop Step away, telling them that there was no problem, they were just moving along. In the following scene, the two of them went to a cafe. There, Nomura commented that so this was the solo project Pop Step had mentioned before. She nodded and explained that since Narafest was ending, she figured it was time to start thinking about what came next for her. Nomura looked disheartened, thinking that it was Americana's fault, and his fault, so he apologized, but Pop Step told him it was okay. She explained that in the past, she had composed songs and done voice training with the twins, but nothing ever came of it. She had also written a few lyrics, but never showed them to anyone, so now she thought, why not try going solo again? Nomura said he was lucky to have happened to pass by that street, and mentioned that busking alone out on the street was a risky business. He added that the company actually had ways to help, so she should just come to her if she needs. However, he suddenly looked downcast again and said that, of course, she wouldn't do all that since she didn't really have any reason to put her faith in him. When she tried to comfort him by calling him Mr. Manager, he pointed out that his name was Nomura, so she started calling him that. Then Nomura suddenly asked if he could listen to some of her songs, and though a bit embarrassed, she agreed. When Nomura read one of the lyrics, "I reach for traces of you, I come up short," He thought it was clearly a song about heartbreak. This annoyed Pop Step, and she asked him why he had to sum it up like that, telling him to stop reading the lyrics out loud. He asked if she was just choosing a tune to fit her lyrics, and she sheepishly admitted that she wasn't good at that kind of thing yet. As Nomura listened to her song, she began to reflect on what she was doing with her life. She said that whenever she tried to stop thinking about it, it always came back to the fact that she still didn't have the real skills to do anything, and she just felt like she was going around in circles. Suddenly, a tear fell onto the table, catching her attention. When she looked at Nomura, he was sobbing, which startled her and prompted her to ask if he was okay. As he wiped his tears, Nomura apologized and said it was just because what he had listened to was so amazing, which made Pop Step ask if he really meant that. After that, Nomura listened to another song and noted that this one seemed to be about tenacity, which made Pop Step confused. He explained that in the first half, the girl was singing about the pain of heartbreak, but then when the key changed, it exploded with a surge of energy. He pointed to the lyrics, "Can't let it end this way, having nothing, being nothing at all, need to shine bright for a sec, dig my claws across his heart," and commented that that kind of obstinance and the courage to feel that way was something that anyone could relate to, even outside of love. So he said it felt less like a love song and more like a rock song about defiance and asserting oneself, which made Pop Step realize that might actually be true. Nomura suddenly looked down again and said there were also things he wanted to do and be, but he had nothing. He felt like he was at a standstill. At the very least, he had wanted to work in the entertainment angle of Americana, but now it seemed like the entire department was about to shut down. He added that listening to Pop Step's song had made him spill his guts. He then seriously told her that she had talent. He took her hand and happily said the world deserved to hear that song and that he wanted to help make it happen. She agreed, but reasoned that it felt like history repeating itself. Back then, it was Makoto who had led everything. She added that she had just gone with the flow of Makoto's leadership, and look at where that got her. It's clear how far she managed to go. Nomura then asked if she's talking about Makoto Tsukuchi, and suddenly grew gloomy again as he admitted that that woman really was something else. They hadn't even met, but he was sure he'd already been compared to her, by Miyu, for example, and he admitted that it was rough. After that, he said that even so, it didn't mean Pop Step had to do everything on her own from now on, which immediately caught her attention. He added that honestly, there's not much a person can do solo, and for him, being self-reliant meant learning to team up with others in order to fully unlock her potential. And on that note, he asked her if she was on board with the idea of him becoming her second producer. In the next scene, while walking down the street, Nomura explained that their plan was for Pop Step to polish up her song, perform it at the final Narafest, and then branch off into solo work using online clips and smaller live shows. He added that there was no guarantee Pop Step would return to the big stage, but he was confident they could take it as far as it could go. Just then, three guys caught their attention, and it turned out to be the same guys who had harassed Pop Step before. The guy with spiked hair irritably remarked that they were hanging around there again. He suddenly grabbed Nomura by the necktie and blamed him, saying that it was his fault that the cops hassled him earlier, then demanded how he was going to make up for it. Nomura quietly whispered to Pop Step that things might get ugly, and she should run as soon as she found an opening. The spiked hair guy got angry and tried to punch Nomura, shouting for him to stop whispering and share what they were talking about with the group. But unfortunately for him, Nomura dodged the punch, and Pop Step took the chance to bounce up to the side of a building, catching the bad guys off guard. Right after that, she pulled out her phone and yelled that she was calling the cops. Nomura told her to wait, saying he thought they could still let them off with a warning. He blocked the spiked hair guy's punch and quickly disarmed him with karate-like precision, easily twisting his arm behind his back. He told them to listen and suggested that they shouldn't go looking for trouble. He showed them his ID and revealed that he was a hero, so they needed to promise. Pop Step was stunned to learn that he was a hero, while the two guys with the spiked hair one took his ID and asked if it was real. The spiked hair guy commented that he thought Nomura worked at a department store, while Nomura grew worried and shouted that the ID was important and they should hand it back immediately. In the next scene, Pop Step approached Koichi to ask him to finally get his hero license, which made him ask where this was coming from. She explained that actually, it was the Narafest manager who gave her the idea, saying he had one himself. Koichi commented that he must be a weirdo, being a licensed hero but spending all day sitting in an office. Pop Step clarified that he didn't get the license to make money, but just so he could jump into action whenever something happened, which Koichi understood and said was cool of him. Pop Step began to blush as she pointed out that it was just like what Koichi used to do. She said she wasn't talking about becoming a big famous hero, and that he could probably just get a license while doing his regular day job. However, Koichi thought that would be hard to pull off and asked why she was even interested in what he's doing, which made her look away and blush as she answered that she wasn't interested at all. Right after that, when Koichi was about to bring up the topic he had discussed with Makoto again, Pop Step suddenly rushed off, saying she had to head to her meeting. But she promised she'd listen to it later, so if he could just wait a little longer. Several hours later, Pop Step's meeting at Maricane department store ended, and there, Nomura reminded everyone to make sure to contact the original Featherhats members before their next meeting. Yu then asked if they could stay in the room, and Miyu explained that they were planning to call the dance club president and the others now, but that it would be more fun and quicker to do it as a group. The three sisters added that they also wanted to say hi to the old gang. Pop Step, meanwhile, apologized because she had somewhere she needed to go and told them to just call her if anything came up. Nomura also told them that he had some work to do and reminded Yu to make sure they lock the room when they leave. As soon as Pop Step stepped outside, she began running, and not far behind her, Nomura was running as well. They exchanged a glance that made it seem like they were plotting something. This made Mio think that maybe something was going on between the two of them, which confused Yu and the three sisters. On the streets of the city, Pop Step waited at one corner while holding her equipment. Before long, Nomura arrived and apologized for the delay, which she brushed off. Then something caught her attention when she looked at him. It turned out Nomura had changed clothes. He said he just needed to change and asked if it looked fresh, which made Pop Step stare at him for a moment before commenting that he actually looked a little goofy. That made Nomura flustered, and he shouted, "No way," saying that this was the real him. After that, while they were walking to their spot, Nomura informed her that he got her a busking permit, so now she could sing without fear. He also handed her an iPod and asked her to listen. He said it was her song, but he had added guitar and sped up the tempo. When Pop Step listened to it, she commented that it sounded really good, which made Nomura happy that she liked it. He suggested that she sing this version now, and that she could get the groove while he set up. She listened to the song carefully and slowly started to catch its vibe. So once Nomura finished setting up, she gave the crowd a solid performance that caught people's attention and lifted their spirits. She performed with all her heart, even making those with earphones or busy with something else turn to look at her. Their joy while listening to her was evident, and it made Nomura smile when he noticed it. The crowd gradually grew larger in front of her, and some even began cheering for her. Pop Step got so hyped that at the climax of the song, she jumped into the air like a rock star, but unfortunately, she didn't anticipate the length of the mic cord she was holding, which yanked her back down and caused her to lose her balance. She fell to the ground because of that, which made Nomura concerned as he asked if she was okay. But despite everything, she smiled and shouted that it was incredibly fun. After their street performance, they decided to take a break at a bar. They each ordered their own drinks and toasted to the great job they did that day. Pop Step noticed that the drink she got smelled like alcohol, which left her speechless for a moment. When Nomura looked at it, he confirmed that it did have alcohol, so Pop Step awkwardly explained that she got carried away and ended up ordering a fancy cocktail. Nomura then offered to switch drinks and give her his virgin one instead. Just then, the three guys who had harassed her previously showed up, but this time they were smiling and applauding her performance from earlier. Pop Step tensed up a bit upon seeing them, so Nomura told her to relax and explained that he had spoken with them after their fight the other day and pointed out that they weren't actually bad guys. He even added that they were pals now. Not long after, the guys left, saying they'd see each other again, and the spiked hair guy even cheered on Pop Step to keep doing her thing. Following that, Nomura pointed out that Rock was actually his nickname, since his name is Rokuro Nomura, one rockin' dude. Pop Step gave him another look and repeated her comment that he really was kind of goofy, which made Nomura yell that it wasn't that weird. Suddenly, Nomura brought up something more serious. He said that the events department at Maricana was going to be shut down, which confused Pop Step. So he explained further that he knew the timing was awful, But the department had only been created to handle Nerafest, and now the higher-ups were saying there's no reason to keep it going. He added that he didn't even know where he'd end up next. Then he pointed out that when she had let him listen to her songs, it was the first time he had felt genuine excitement since entering the working world, and he mentioned that it felt like something amazing was about to begin. Because of all the frustration and everything going on, he started drinking more to try and escape from it all, leaving Pop Step speechless. After several hours of drinking, they were walking home, with Pop Step supporting a drunk Nomura. He was crying because of all the regrets weighing on him. Pop Step commented that she hadn't expected him to be such a lightweight, to which Nomura sadly replied that she was right, that he was a lightweight loser of a man. Suddenly, Nomura stopped and asked her to listen. He grabbed both of her shoulders and shouted that he wasn't going to give up, which surprised Pop Step. He suddenly hugged her and said that maybe he would lose his job, but he was going to be Pop Step's producer. Hers and hers alone. The look on Pop Step's face showed how shocked she was by this. Nomura then pointed out that he was her biggest fan, so he'd do what he could for her. After that, Pop Step thanked him, which caught Nomura's attention. He also noticed the way he was holding her because of that, which made him back off a little. Pop Step added to her thanks that she was going to be okay. She was still figuring out what she was truly capable of, and besides, she said, there was only one person she wanted to hear her songs, which prompted Nomura to ask if she meant the guy mentioned in her lyrics. But she said no, and pointed out that the person who needed to hear them was actually herself. And now, she added, she was finally ready to tell herself that she was amazing and that she's capable. After that, she ran off while thanking Nomura once again, saying that she was going to make good use of the courage he had given her. She bounced away from that place, while Nomura could only stare after her. Then someone behind Nomura spoke and caught his attention. It turned out to be those same three guys again. The spiked-haired guy commented that it sounded like some drunks were making noise here, and pointed out that since Nomura was a hero, he should pull himself together. Nomura replied that it felt like he just got dumped, prompting the three guys to start teasing him. The spiked-haired guy laughed and said they saw the whole thing. Nomura explained that he wanted Pop Step to like him, so he played out the whole act. He pretended to be a grown-up and a good person. The three continued teasing him, saying they'd been through that too and told him to cheer up, suggesting maybe he should just show his true colors and win her over that way. That's when Nomura's feet began to crackle, and he muttered that the spiked-haired guy was exactly right. Suddenly, in an eerie tone, he decided he didn't need them anymore, and it was revealed that he was actually number 6, as the scar on his face became visible. Blood began to spatter as he brutally beat the guys with terrifying speed. While that was happening, we shift to Koichi's penthouse, where Pop Step arrived holding a paper bag containing her hoodie. Koichi commented that he didn't expect her to show up this late, to which Pop Step blushingly agreed that it is late. In Pop Step's mind, she kept telling herself that she was amazing, that she was capable, and that she could handle everything. She asked Koichi if they could talk, and he agreed but added to wait for a second. Koichi adjusted his necktie and happily showed it to her, explaining that it was a battle-ready tie for his upcoming interview. When he cheerfully added that it was a gift from Makoto, Pop Step was struck with sudden shock and stopped smiling. She quickly turned her back to Koichi as he asked what she wanted to talk about, then suddenly walked out of the penthouse without saying anything more, leaving Koichi confused. As soon as Pop Step got home, she called Nomura while sobbing and apologized for running away earlier like an idiot, saying she had been so full of herself. Nomura asked what was wrong, and she said that she felt like she needed him to be there for her. Nomura agreed and told her to try to calm down. He admitted he didn't really know what had happened, but told her that everything would be okay. While they were talking, the scene returned to Nomura's situation, and we see the 3 men he had attacked now lying unconscious and badly beaten. As he spoke to Pop Step, he said that she'll be okay because he was her fan, and he would always be on her side. In the next scene, Pop Step and Nomura met up to talk, with number 6 continuing his facade. Pop Step shyly said that there was something important she needed to talk about with someone close to her. But when she struggled to express her but, Nomura asked if it was because she couldn't find the courage to say it, which made her wonder if that really was the reason. She suddenly looked downhearted, but still responded that maybe that was true. However, there was another, but she couldn't bring herself to say, thinking to herself that maybe she had made a mistake by opening up, since that wasn't what she really wanted to convey. Not long after, Nomura realized what she meant and said that it really was hard to get the timing right, which immediately caught Popstep's attention. After thinking for a moment, she nervously agreed and said that it really was a matter of timing. In Nomura's mind, he told himself that this time, he got it right, and began imagining his master, a clock, teaching him how to use his quirk to interpret a person's subconscious reactions. He explained that human actions are a blend of the conscious and the subconscious. Even less cognitive animals that rely solely on instinct and habit still have something resembling consciousness in their control centers. But when that consciousness tries to exert control, it's too weak, so their conscious reaction always comes several tenths of a second too late. He added that thanks to his overclock quirk, he can detect a person's subconscious tells during conversation. In an instant, he can adjust his response, either to tell them what they want to hear or to expose the uncomfortable truth they're trying to avoid. Furthermore, by feeding them the right information in that narrow gap between awareness and thought, it's actually possible to manipulate what they think and feel. Nomura silently thanked his imaginary master for that. Back to his conversation with Popstep, she admitted that the truth is, at the end of the day, she just doesn't feel confident. She added that up to now, whether with her mom, the girls in their group, or even with Koichi, she had only ever shown them one particular version of herself. She was afraid that if they ever saw who she really was, all the things she kept hidden inside, they wouldn't accept her. Nomura told her not to be silly and pointed out that everyone loves her. She disagreed and said that love comes in different forms, to which Nomura nodded, thinking that they were finally getting to the heart of the matter. He suggested a change of scenery and explained that what was missing for her was healthy communication with the people around her. He said she already knew that deep down. He told her to calm down, take stock, and examine her feelings. Then once she's done that, to try starting those conversations with everyone. With her mom, with the girls, and as she works through it, also with Koichi. Popstep stood up and happily agreed with Nomura's suggestion, which made him smile back at her. After their talk, the two continued their conversation as they walked home. As they made their way back, we flash back to a point in time when Knuckle Duster was still with them. When he got back to Koichi's apartment, he found Popstep cooking. He commented that it was rare to see her like that, and Popstep, blushing, explained that she did cook from time to time, and Koichi mentioned to her that he liked curry. But then her expression suddenly turned irritated as she asked if Knuckle Duster had a problem with that. Knuckle Duster asked why he would have a problem with it. She could do whatever she wanted. However, he pointed out that her habit of hiding her motives and feelings was a bad one, and she needed to work on it. He said that if she clung to that kind of cognitive dissonance for too long, it would stop her from making the right moves. Popstep, annoyed, thanked him for the tip, but added that no one asked for it, to which Knuckle Duster simply replied that that's just how he is. Since he had lit a cigarette, Popstep told him to quit smoking indoors, and he immediately put it out. Not long after, Koichi arrived and was immediately filled with joy upon smelling the curry Popstep was cooking. While scooping rice, he commented that he thought he smelled something delicious. He asked if Popstep cooked it for him, and if so, thanked her very much. He said he really loved curry, while Knuckle Duster and Popstep were left speechless by him. Popstep then pointed at Knuckle Duster and asked if he meant she should expose her true feelings too, like that idiot, to which Knuckle Duster replied, everything in moderation, while Koichi remained confused by what they were talking about. After that, we return to the present, where Popstep told Nomura that she thinks people ought to be honest and upfront with themselves and others. This confused Nomura, who commented, say it ain't so. In fact, he said he liked the version of Pop who was all bark and some bite, which made Popstep blush and get embarrassed, telling him not to say things like that, because it wasn't what she needed right now. She then added that what she meant was, Nomura himself was pretty honest too. He didn't snap at people, pout, or sulk. He might not always be reliable, but at least he was gentle. She said she thought it was better to be that way. Nomura smugly questioned the honest and gentle label, saying those weren't exactly compliments to him, because he was Rock Nomura, a wild man hiding a fiery, passionate side and a complex inner life. Popstep just smiled and immediately began walking away, annoyed as she asked if he was doing that shtick again. Nomura stopped her and insisted he was being serious. He told her she'd be surprised if she saw his secret base, and she could even call it a hideout. Pop Step asked if he was referring to the cafe from the other day and commented that it was a nice place. In the next scene, they went to a rundown area in the city where Nomura brought her to a decrepit building. She asked if that was the place, and Nomura, sounding a little embarrassed, said it looked like it was about ready for demolition. Pop Step brushed it off and said she also knew someone who lived in an abandoned dump. Not long after, they entered the building, and Nomura helped her descend a steep staircase while she wondered aloud if there was still some business operating down in the basement. Once they were down, Nomura pointed to a door and told Pop Step to go inside. She commented that there wasn't even a sign on it and asked if it was some sort of studio that required membership to enter. Pop Step said pardon me as she opened the door, but to her surprise, what greeted her was the buzzing sound of bees. Nervously, she told Nomura that the inside of the room was pitch black, to which Nomura's demeanor changed, and he said seriously, "That's right." Pop Step grew confused by his answer, and then he suddenly shoved her inside, causing her to fall to the floor and her glasses to come off. Nomura closed the door behind her, plunging the place into even deeper darkness. Pop Step tried to scan her surroundings despite her blurry vision, and she saw several people collapsed on the ground, with countless bees flying all around. She felt an overwhelming sense of unease, and the sound of buzzing grew louder as the swarm approached her. In the next scene, at the Marukane department store, Mio and you were trying to call Pop Step and Mr. Nomura, but neither of them was answering. At that moment, Koichi arrived and said it had been a while since he last saw them. He mentioned that he was happy he could pass by on his way home from job hunting and asked if his necktie looked good. He also pointed out that they rarely invited him anymore and wondered why Pop Step hadn't told him anything. Because of that, someone told him they hadn't been able to contact her, which really surprised him. You said they had a scheduled meeting that afternoon, but they couldn't reach Pop Step or the manager for Marukane, while Mio added that she didn't like that at all. She said that lately, Pop Step had been acting strangely and that she should have sat her down and asked about it directly, ending up asking herself, how could she have been so dumb? You then said that recently, it seemed like Pop Step was involved in something other than Nerafest, and asked Koichi if Pop Step mentioned anything to him. Koichi replied that now that he thought about it, Pop Step was about to say something the other day, but suddenly walked out. But he explained that kind of behavior for Pop Step wasn't new. Mio looked extremely mad at that point, and called Koichi a total blockhead, so he seemed scared of her. You said they should confirm Pop Step's real name and get in touch with her home and school. Mio told her not to forget to check her website and social media, and she ordered the three girls to look into her usual hangout spots. She also asked Koichi to search for clues at his house and ask around the neighborhood if anyone had seen her. Koichi agreed, and Mio added that she would stay at Marukane until evening with you, and to call them if he found anything. Then, we shift to Koichi's house, where he was trying to call Pop Step, but she still wasn't answering. Even so, her belongings were still there, and he said she would get mad if he touched any of her stuff. He tried checking the corkboard, but there was no message left for him, and he didn't have her address or anything at all. That made him realize that he actually had very few ways to reach Pop Step, and now that he was thinking about it, he didn't really know much about her. She just suddenly came into his life one day, and since then, they were always together. He had just assumed that things would always be that way, but when people pop into your life, they can also disappear just as quickly. There is no guarantee that there will be a future for them, so he had to figure things out that very day. He wandered around places like the cat cafe owned by the Hata brothers, asking himself who Pop Step usually hung out with, where should he go to find her, what her likes and dislikes were, what her dreams were, who she looked up to, and details about her family and friends. He wasn't the only one looking for Pop Step, because even her fanboys were also searching. One man he talked to pointed him to a building, so Koichi climbed it. Aside from all those questions, he also wanted to know who he was to Pop Step, and who Pop Step was to him. Even so, he realized this was exactly what Makoto meant during their last conversation, because she was always right. At that moment, someone called him. It was Mio, and she informed him that they had spoken with Pop Step's mother. Apparently, she hadn't come home since last weekend, so her family had filed a missing person report. Koichi was surprised because Mio had only just found out that day, so she explained that Pop Step didn't tell her family about Nerafest, which was why they didn't know to contact them. Mio added that the police had come to talk to them, and Koichi needed to go over there. While he was on the way, Koichi said that is bad. Then, in the next scene, we were shown several bomber bees flying toward a billboard. The bees blew up the billboard, which shocked Koichi. He panicked a little, but he quickly regained his footing. He jumped onto the rooftop of a building and asked what that was, but he immediately realized they were bombs. Because of what happened, some debris fell near the people below, and we saw one of the bomber bee return to the girl who had sent it. That girl had hair that looked like Pop Steps, and sure enough, the person she was with called her Pop and asked if they should leave. We find out that the person she was with was Rock, also known as Mr. Nomura, and he said that Pop and Rock were on their way to the top of the charts. Because of the explosion and the falling debris, many people were affected and started to panic. Rock noticed what was happening and told Pop Step that the venue was already fired up for her, and it looked like it was showtime. Pop Step jumped down from the building and said it was sweet, because the people would be beguiled by her new self. As she fell freely, she sent out more bomber bees to create another explosion and grab the attention of the crowd. She used satellite bees to take control of the speakers across the streets and announced, "Let the impromptu live show from the new and improved Pop Step begin." She did not just control the speakers, but also other electronics and the phones of the people. She added that her single for today was a fresh remix of an old standby, the theme song of the Marukane department store titled Inferno. She began singing while causing explosions everywhere, and changed some of the lyrics to include the words bomb and bang. According to the lyrics of her remix, she did not care, she could not hear anything, her soul was screaming, and she was bouncing off the concrete walls. She said she was trapped inside a box and her breathing had slowed. The fuse was already lit and the bomb was ready to explode. As she continued singing, she kept setting off explosions across the buildings, shocking Koichi, her fanboys, her companions from Nerafest, as well as the Hata brothers, Kaomon, and Teiko. She then created an even bigger explosion, and her face showed how thrilled she was with what she was doing. At that moment, Mio called out to her, telling her to come down because she was getting close to the explosion danger zone. However, Pop Step disagreed with Mio. She said that danger is sexy, being feared is awesome, and destruction was beautiful. She added that deep inside, they all think that too. She told them to just take a look, because the city looked so beautiful that night, and they should let her share that beauty with them. She then sent a bomber bee toward her Nerafest companions, and caused it to explode near the billboard close to where they were. Mio was left in shock, and Yu became worried that her sibling might get hit by falling debris. But to their surprise, Koichi suddenly arrived to save Mio. Koichi quickly left the scene, jumping across buildings to chase Pop Step. He told her that he did not fully understand what was going on with her, but he was the kind of man who could not ignore her, as he was the crawler. Pop Step looked at him because of that, and told him that he was a little too late. She said he looked desperate and clingy, which was embarrassing, and then sent bomber bees flying in his direction. Pop Step detonated them near him, and Koichi caught a glimpse of something that shocked him. It was Rock, who told him that he had missed his cue, calling him Prince Charming. Pop Step is now a queen, and she was no longer his little princess, while Pop Step said she hates Koichi and stuck her tongue out at him. Koichi was stunned and could do nothing but fall, while Pop Step simply watched. She said that since the heckler appeared, who was Koichi, it was time to end that night's performance. She said that the next one would begin with a surprise, so everyone should get hyped for the meantime. She said goodbye and leapt higher in the air. She then disappeared in a massive blast in the sky. At that very moment, the authorities arrived. Meanwhile, in an alley, Koichi hit a soda can, and it rolled and hit the foot of a person who saw him lying among the trash bags. In the next scene, a reporter covered what had happened in downtown Narahata the previous night. He mentioned that viewers might remember that 3 years ago, Narahata was struck by a villain attack known as the Kaiju attack, and now it looked like another monster had terrorized Narahata. He added that although progress had been made in clearing the streets of rubble, the area was closed off out of fear that the damaged buildings might collapse. Then, he showed footage recorded by a passerby that appeared to show a girl dancing amidst the explosions, like a leaf in the wind. It seemed her gestures were controlling the blasts, as she watched the destruction while laughing. Loud music was also reportedly blasting from every direction. It was believed that the sound had been achieved by hijacking wireless signals and broadcasting them through all nearby electronic devices and speaker systems. Local authorities were also investigating the disappearance of a local high school girl who had been reported missing several days prior. They now suspected this girl was likely connected to the bombing. One man claimed the girl they were looking for used to sing on the streets years ago and now served as an MC at events, and she had become somewhat well known. A woman commented that Pop Step seemed kind, but her husband was convinced that she had the makings of a bad seed. 2 students shared that Pop Step had said, "Until next time," which they found frightening. At that moment, a new report came in, stating that authorities had made an official declaration that the Narahata girl known as Pop Step had been declared a villain and was now a wanted suspect. The reporter explained that the villain designation and registry were usually reserved for repeat offenders charged with quirk-related crimes, and that what happened to Pop Step was a rare exception given her age and the fact that this was her first offense. Meanwhile, in New York, Makoto argued that what was happening to Pop Step was a human rights violation and told her older brother that he needed to stop people from plastering Pop Step's name everywhere. However, Nomasa replied that it was not possible because Kazuho Hanayama, also known as Pop Step, was a wanted suspect for a vicious large-scale quirk-based attack. That villain label meant she would not be treated as a minor in the eyes of the law. Makoto asked whether Pop Step was just a suspect and suggested they start with a presumption of innocence and something else. But before she could finish, her brother told her not to argue just for the sake of it, leaving her with no choice but to listen. Nomasa added that if a second or third attack happened, it could lead to worse consequences than just minor injuries and property damage. That was not the time for Makoto to argue, and if she did anything reckless, she might be charged as an accomplice. He said he understood that Makoto felt responsible for Pop Step, but now is not her place to act. That moment would come later. He told Makoto to support Pop Step after she was arrested, and during the trial, support her rehabilitation into society, and get the media on her side. He said he wanted Makoto to be at her best when the time came. So for now, she needed to be on standby. Makoto asked if he was just trying to comfort her, but he clarified that he was simply reminding her to take responsibility in the right way. Makoto agreed, and Nomasa said that was good. But then Makoto said there was something she needed to know, asking about what was going on with Koichi. Nomasa asked if she meant Koichi Himawari, also known as the Crawler, and Makoto said that if Pop Step needed anyone right now, it was not her, it was Koichi. In the next scene, we return to Japan, inside a hospital. Pop Step's mother appeared on TV, saying she could not understand her daughter and asked why she would do such a thing. Yu was watching the broadcast, while Miyu asked where Koichi was and hoped he would return to them. At the Hata Brothers Cafe, Ichiro commented that the situation seemed like a big deal, and Jiro replied that Pop Step was in serious trouble. Kamayan remarked that he was curious about what Koichi was up to, prompting the brothers to wonder why Cruller wasn't involved. Still, Kamayan insisted that situations like these were Koichi's specialty. It was also reported that a college student from Narahata, known to be a close associate of Pop Step, one Koichi Himawari, 22 years old, had also gone missing. A man in a coat and boots listened to the news, and it was Soga. The report said that investigations were progressing under the assumption that Koichi was also likely involved in the incident. We then shift to Toshi Motors, where Rapt was playing video games, and behind him, an injured man lay unconscious. Moyuru told Rapt to lower the volume because it was too loud, but Rapt replied he could not pause the game. Moyuru let it go, and at that moment, the injured man woke up, catching both their attention. We find out that the man was Koichi, who Rapt called the Crawler. Moyuru remarked that it had been a while since they last saw each other, while Koichi asked where he was, and Rapt said it was their lair. Moyuru corrected him, saying it was his parents' house, and told Koichi he had been asleep for a long time and asked if anything hurt. Koichi said everywhere, and Rapt explained that he had fallen off a building, and that was bad news, since a fall like that had once landed him in the hospital too. They fed Koichi, and Moyuru said he was now strong enough to eat more than porridge. Unfortunately, he had already made porridge, so Koichi had to eat it. Rapt pointed out that Soga had asked them to do more than just feed Koichi, so Moyuru remembered that they needed to turn on the news, and Rapt said he needed to free up the TV. The moment Koichi heard that, He remembered the bombs and Pop stepped, and right then, Soga arrived. Rapt greeted him, and Moyuru asked if he had seen anything strange at the station, but Soga replied that he had not. Koichi shyly greeted him too, and then focused back on the news. Rapt asked what was wrong with Koichi because he had spazzed out when they turned on the TV. Moyuru said they can't blame him, and the news said more reports would come out about the Narahata bombings once new information became available. Koichi realized he needed to speak with the police, and said he would tell them everything about Pop. But before he could continue, Soga asked if he was really going to leave everything to the cops and the heroes, saying it is an option, if Koichi is cool with that. Koichi hesitated, clearly thinking deeply about it. At that point, Soga took a letter from his back pocket and handed it to Koichi, telling him to read it. Koichi then took the letter, and when he read it, it said that if he was reading it, then he had likely gotten himself into serious trouble, and the one who wrote the letter might be the one to blame. The writer apologized, saying that if his past came back to bite Koichi, he was sorry. He asked if Koichi remembered the day they first met, leading Koichi asked if the letter was from Knuckle Duster, and Soga said he should just read it. Knuckle Duster said he had once told Koichi he would make him a true blue hero, but that was a lie. In the next scene, we go back to the past, in an alley in Narahata, where a man was urinating when someone called out to him. It was Knuckle Duster, saying he was looking for whoever had been selling the latest drug, so if the guy knew anything, he should speak up. The man was confused by what Knuckle Duster said and was about to ask what he was talking about. But before he could finish, Knuckle Duster hit him in the face with a liquor bottle. Then Knuckle Duster forced him to stick out his tongue, so the man punched him in the face while shouting, "Screw you." Knuckle Duster grabbed the man and said that was not the tongue he was looking for, then threw the man to the ground, while someone then arrived and told them to stop. It was Koichi, and the man asked who he was, and he said he was just a passerby, but that fighting was no good and he was sure the two had their reasons, but they should settle things peacefully. However, the man punched Koichi, furious that he said, "You both," because he claimed he was the only victim, so Koichi quickly apologized. The man walked away, telling Koichi to stop pissing him off, and said the same about Knuckle Duster, calling him a crazy old bastard. Knuckle Duster said nothing and was about to leave, but Koichi stopped him and pointed out that his nose was bleeding. Koichi handed him a tissue, all the while his own nose is bleeding too. Knuckle Duster looked at his nose, then walked away smiling. Back at Toshi Motors, Koichi continued reading the letter. As written in the letter, if Koichi was reading it, then it meant he had gotten himself into some kind of big trouble, and that Knuckle Duster might be to blame. Knuckle Duster said first of all, he was sorry if his business had come back to bite Koichi. Still, there was one more thing. He asked if Koichi remembered the day they met, and said that he had told Koichi he would turn him into a true blue hero, but that was a lie, because it was just a way for him to get through to Koichi. He admitted he deceived Koichi, and for that, he needed to apologize. That said, he was not worried at all, because he had all the confidence in the world that Koichi would do great. To begin with, what even is a hero? Knuckle Duster said a hero is someone who uses their exceptional quirk for the benefit of society. Someone who provides a good example of how to live while staying true to their quirk. In other words, a hero is someone who represents the harmony between quirk and society, or at least that is what they are told. Knuckle Duster said he once knew a hero like that, referring to a clock, a person who specialized in fighting crime. Sometimes he worked alone, sometimes with police, but either way, he was responsible for taking down an impressive number of illegal organizations. However, in the end, he was no more than a particularly efficient cog in the machine meant to maintain societal order, and at that point, we were taken back to a time when Knuckle Duster was still a clock on a mission. He shot out a few security devices and jumped down. He entered the building in a rush, and as he stepped into one of the rooms, his face filled with shock. He saw a man in the middle of a wrecked room, and we come to realize it was all for one. According to Knuckle Duster's story, a clock did not have the ability to deviate from the system or deal with entities that eclipsed common understanding. He lacked the means to struggle against the irrational threats or fight against true evil, and at that moment, All for One had already caught a clock and was crushing his face. All for One succeeded, and according to Knuckle Duster, that was the moment when a person's mettle is truly tested. When confronted with one's own helplessness, Most people abandon their ideals and let themselves go. Some fall into despair and become monsters, choosing to hurt others, just as it happened to him. Meanwhile, the smallest fraction of people, the rarest of the rare, manage to hold on to their goodness and humanity even when faced with misfortune, where Koichi comes in as the example. Depending on the person, being good can be unimaginably difficult. But the people who overcome that challenge are the ones he calls heroes, people like Koichi. Knuckle Duster said Koichi had that goodness inside of him, and he was the kind of person who never missed a chance to help others. In fact, Knuckle Duster himself was one of the people Koichi saved, and as he said all of this, the scenes show the many moments Koichi helped others. Knuckle Duster repeated that when he met Koichi, he said he would make him a true blue hero, but it was a lie. Because the truth was, he did not need to tell Koichi what to do, since he already had the answer himself. Koichi was one of the rare ones, born with that unshakable goodness inside him. A true hero, his hero. He added that Koichi was in serious trouble because of the Narahata bombings, and along with a few allies, he was facing a challenge like no other. But Knuckle Duster was not worried at all. When facing overwhelming catastrophe, there is no shame in running away at full speed. But if there is someone waiting to be saved, Koichi knows that he needs to fly in there and get it done. The answer is so obvious that it does not even qualify as a choice to be made. Whatever Knuckle Duster says to Koichi, he knows Koichi will do what needs to be done, and he will save the people who need to be saved. Koichi will give everything he has and even more. And it's that iron will that can flip buildings and make the impossible possible. Knuckle Duster knows Koichi can do it, and that is why he tells Koichi not to doubt himself. "Fly, Koichi, fly, hero," he said, and he added that Koichi should figure out how to land properly. After reading the letter, Koichi took a deep breath. Then he asked Soga where Knuckle Duster was, but Soga answered asking who knows because he was only told to watch over them. Moyuru commented that now that Soga mentioned it, they haven't seen old Knuckle Duster for a while, and Rapt added that maybe he was lying in a ditch somewhere. Soga said Koichi should forget about Knuckle Duster for now because the issue was Pop Step, who had been possessed by something nasty, the bees. Koichi was confused about the bees, but then remembered Pop Step had used them. Soga explained that the bees were parasites that could control people, like what they did to Tamao. If Koichi left things to the heroes, they could stop Pop Step from destroying the city, but the second they try to arrest her, the worst case would be that the bees would mess her up from the inside and fly away. He said there was a way to extract the queen bee before that happened, but doing so would break many laws. That is why the heroes and the police would never do it, and it would be considered a crime if done by someone else. The situation already sucks, so Soga said he would ask Koichi just once. Was he going to do it or not? Koichi was confused and stammered out, "I do not know." Rapt asked what kind of answer that was, and Koichi said he meant yes, but he did not know where to start. Moyura told him to stop giving such vague answers because they were confusing, so Koichi asked why it was confusing, saying he could not even understand the question himself. He said there was only one way forward, and it did not even qualify as a decision. Soga was surprised and started laughing. That made Rapt laugh too, saying Koichi had made Soga laugh, and Moyuru said it was not something you saw every day. Meanwhile, Soga just looked annoyed. In the next scene, Soga brought Koichi to a certain place, so Koichi asked him what it was and whether it was some kind of warehouse. Soga answered that they should go inside first, then talk. Moyuru was surprised when they entered, and so was Koichi, who remarked that the place looked like a hideout for a terrorist cell. Meanwhile, Rapt was thrilled, saying they now had a secret base. There were supplies, gym equipment, and some electronics in that place, and Soga said that Knuckle Duster had left not only the letter, but instructions that they could use anything they needed there. Koichi was surprised that everything was available for use, while Rapt was excited about the shotguns, though Soga warned him not to touch them because they were loaded. Rapt said it was sweet because the stuff was the real deal, and as a joke, he pointed a shotgun at Moyuru, who warned him not to point it at anyone. Rapt was clearly enjoying himself and said the guns were too cool. Koichi then asked Soga what all this was. He was referring to the map in front of him that had a lot of pictures pinned to it. Rapt called it a good question, and Moyuru also asked if it was a map. Koichi realized it was a map of the area around Narahata Station. He pointed out that the crossed-out buildings were the ones destroyed during the kaiju attack, and part of the highway had also been damaged. He added that some new buildings had already been constructed but were not yet marked on the map, so maybe Knuckle Duster had stopped updating it 3 summers ago. He also noticed that Knuckle Duster had marked not only his routes, but also his own. The plan was apparently to split up at an intersection, and he would chase or lure the villains while Knuckle Duster would enter from another side for a pincer attack. There was also a route marked for Pop Step, who was leaping from rooftop to rooftop to get the best views from above. Deep inside, Koichi thought that everything Knuckle Duster did seemed so wild, but it turned out they were all calculated, though still a little wild. He smiled at the thought of the memories coming back, and Rapt pointed out that he was smiling, so Moiru said it was a bit creepy. Koichi then noticed another route that puzzled him. He asked whose it was, because the person could jump, but not as well as Pop Step, and was not as fast as him on the ground either. It seemed that Knuckle Duster probably wanted to chase that person down and corner them in a dead-end alley, the same exact tactic he had used on Tamao. Soga said that that case was already closed, but Koichi might want to reference the same strategy. He also asked if Koichi thinks he can corner her the same way. Koichi asked if he meant Pop Step, and he said he can't trap her the same way because Pop Step could kick off walls and leap over buildings. However, grabbing her midair might be possible, so Soga said that was the plan. Soga continued that when Pop Step next shows up, Koichi would have 3 big tasks. First, arrive at the scene before the heroes or police. Second, catch Pop Step midair. Third, meet up with them on the ground. After that, Koichi should leave the first aid to him, and they would bring Pop Step to a hospital. Moiru was surprised that they were getting involved and asked if wasn't it illegal to interfere in hero work. Rapt did not care, saying it sounds fun, and said he was a big fan of Pop Step because she had a really nice butt. Moiru asked if one cute buns was really worth earning a rap sheet, so Koichi apologized for involving them. Soga said he was doing it because he wanted to, so Koichi should not sweat it. He then added that their first task would be stamina testing, and if Koichi was in it to win it, they should start. Before long, they started the test. Moiru told Koichi to run at full speed while filming him, while Rapt warned him not to crash into a wall, and Soga gave the signal to start. Koichi readied himself, then quickly dashed forward, and his speed left Moiru and Rapt stunned. He then proceeded to move in a zigzag motion, and stopped right in front of them. Moiru said Koichi's acceleration was insane, and Rapt added that his sharp turns and instant stopping ability too, so he asked what Koichi even was. Koichi appreciated the praise, and said he could go even faster on long straights, so Moiru said they needed to put him on a real street, while Soga just listened and recorded his time. Next, Koichi tested his jumps. He jumped twice in the air before landing on a wall. He explained that he could only do 2 mid-air jumps in a row at most, because doing a third would leave him with no power left for wall clinging and he would fall, and he added that even the 2 jumps were already pushing it. He could reach high places with his wall climbing if he built up momentum, but if he pushed himself too far, he would lose suction and fall, so it is too dangerous to use often. He also mentioned that stopping midway would mean losing all momentum and getting stranded. Moiru commented that his quirk was not good for moving vertically, but Soga replied that that depended on how Koichi uses it. If getting out of breath was what caused him to fall, then learning to control his breathing with proper timing could make all the difference. Then he said what test is next. In the next scene, Moiru was ready to film while Rapt was ready to throw the cans. Rapt tossed the cans, and Koichi used Shooty Go Blam to hit them. He nailed all 3, and Moiru said Koichi was a decent shot. Koichi thanked him and said it was starting to feel automatic, while Rapt joked that Koichi should aim for his belly button next. Soga asked if that was Koichi's full power, and said that Koichi's ace move was pretty basic, so they should see it for real. Koichi looked at his hand, while Moiru and Rapt watched him, curious about what he was thinking. Then the story jumped back to the past. Pop Step asked Koichi if he wanted her permission to use Shooty Go Blam. She said she was not sure if she could give that because he needed to go to school and get a license, and she reminded him that it was supposed to be off limits. Koichi answered that he knew he could not use it casually, and he only meant it for emergencies and only as much as he needed. Pop Step was surprised by that phrasing and asked how strong the blast was. Koichi said it depended on the situation, and Popstep said he wasn't making much of an argument. Koichi gave her an example, saying sometimes he had to distract villains or stop them from charging in. Each case demanded something different, so the strength varied. Popstep asked if he could really make those decisions and fine-tune his power in the middle of a fight. Koichi admitted it was kind of tricky, so he suggested doing a face test, which confused Popstep. Koichi set up some cans and said he would fire test shots for her to watch how strong they were. On the first shot, Popstep had no reaction, so Koichi said that looked acceptable. On the second shot, she still barely reacted but showed slight irritation, so Koichi said he was approaching the "you are pushing it" level. On the third shot, Popstep looked angry, so Koichi asked if that one was already bad. Popstep asked why Koichi was using her face to decide, and Koichi said it was because it was easier to judge things in the moment if he just thinks back and remember. She got mad and asked if her face was his measuring stick, then punched him and asked how about that. So Koichi replied that was definitely another bad one. Back in the present, Koichi unleashed 3 piercing SGBs at once. Moiru and Rapt were shocked, and Koichi turned toward them with his hand still raised, so they pleaded with him not to point it at them. Koichi said that when he focused all his power into Shooty Go Blam's core, it came out like that. The shots reached farther than usual, faster and stronger too. Moiru said that Koichi might end up killing someone with that kind of power, while Soga just marveled at the force behind it. Koichi knew Popstep would not approve, and even admitted that deep down, he knew it was off limits, but right now, he had no choice. In the next scene, Soga had Koichi do target practice using target dummies. He said that the distance from where Koichi would shoot was about 20 meters, the farthest he could test within the area. He added that if Koichi's projectiles were going to be of any use, he needed to learn how to snipe, so he had him start shooting. Koichi focused his power for the Shooty Go Kablam and launched an attack toward the targets. His face was very serious, and because of how strong the attack was, it pierced through the wall, making both Rapt and Moiru gape in shock. However, he only hit the 2 round targets, completely missing the human-shaped one, prompting someone to comment that he was a swing and a miss guy. Rapt said that Koichi managed to hit the cans he threw before, so how come he could not land a single shot on the larger human-shaped target, and Koichi replied that he did not know. Moiru pointed out that Koichi did hit the round targets, even scoring bullseyes. Soga then thought, wondering if Koichi subconsciously could not bring himself to hit people with his full-power shots. Judging by Koichi's reaction, that seemed to be the case. Soga said that if Koichi could just hit Popstep with one of those extra blam shots on the leg, it would make things simple, but that was exactly where he kept failing, because he was subconsciously making himself miss on human-shaped targets. Because of that, Rapt suggested that Koichi should practice shooting people while pointing at Moiru, who immediately told him to stop pointing at him. Soga said there was no time for that since old habits die hard, especially when it was subconscious. Koichi asked if they were going back to using the normal SGB, but Soga replied that it was too slow and had too short a range, so there was no hope of hitting a flying enemy. He then told Koichi to focus on using his mobility and martial arts to back Popstep into a corner. Since projectiles would not get the job done, the fight would end up in an old-fashioned chase. In the next scene, Moiru and Rapt pretended to be villains chasing Koichi, but he used zigzag dodging to make them crash into each other. Koichi then tried climbing a wall, with both of them trying to pull him down. They succeeded, and he landed on a soft padded floor. Then, they all took a break and had snacks. Not long, nighttime came, but Koichi kept training, as was shown doing sit-ups against a wall with only his feet touching it, and pull-ups from the ceiling with his hands clinging onto it, while Soga watched him do all that. He later slept beside Rapt, while Soga continued strategizing over the map. In another scene, Rapt wrapped bandages around Koichi, and he continued training, even lifting both Rapt and a giant tire on his back, and sparring with Rapt and Moiru at the same time. By the second night, Moiru returned with food. Rapt happily greeted him, and he said he also brought copies of the map. Soga asked how the town was doing, and he replied that there was not much progress with the building repairs. He said that even though the government was rushing to fix things, nobody could tell when something would get blown up again. There were only a few people walking around, and half the shops were closed. He added that he also saw some heroes patrolling here and there, but that was about it. He then asked Soga what he was doing and whether he was watching videos of the Naruhata bombing. Soga said he was trying to get a better handle on the physical abilities, speed, and power blasts, and how many Pop Step could control at once. However, he was annoyed at the quality of the footage since it was taken by amateurs. Moyuru told him to take his time, saying there was no need to rush. It looked like an extreme prank where Pop Step had way too much fun, so Soga said he was beginning to wonder. He thought that Pop Step might no longer know right from wrong, and from what he saw from the sidelines, it seemed like she was suffering. Koichi, while eating, said they needed to rescue Pop Step immediately. He added that once he caught Pop, he'll have a good talk with her, believing she would listen to reason. Rap teased that Koichi was the guy who fell into a dump because Pop Step stuck her tongue out at him and gave him the cold shoulder. Moyuru asked where his confidence came from, and Koichi was shown trembling. He said he had been thinking about it and believed that Pop Step had that kind of side to her. Sometimes she would get angry and he didn't know why, but spending time with her helped. He believed that everything would be okay if he could just be with her again, but Rap pointed out that she left after seeing him. Koichi insisted that was why he had to hunt her down, tie her up, and do whatever it took, so Moyuru commented that he was starting to sound like a creepy stalker. Soga then said that he would draft a strategy by morning and told Koichi to rest for now. Koichi agreed, and Rap remarked that having a nap sounds pretty good. Soga went back to the computer, but Moyuru put a hand on his shoulder and told him to rest too, since searching for decent videos was something he could handle. Koichi had already gone to sleep, and Rap was piling on top of him because he moves a lot while sleeping. Soga slept on the couch, while Moyuru continued his search for good videos. He then called out to Soga and said what he was about to say might sound tacky, but helping people was kind of fun. Soga thought about it and told her that this was not playtime, so he should take it seriously, and he laughed while saying fair enough. Somewhere else, inside a huge room, Pop Step was being tormented by love, hate, and her bees. She looked extremely affected and was even coughing up blood. On top of that, she was overwhelmed by joy, suffering, and the pressure of playing for keeps. She tried to stand up, and once she did, she said that Koichi better wait, because by the time they were done, he would never ever forget about her. Meanwhile, at a tent in Naruhata, a police officer thanked the heroes who took time out of their busy schedules to show up that day. He explained that the primary goal of the Naruhata Enhanced Vigilance Project was to take extra precautions against the villain Pop Step, who had bombed a neighborhood 1 week ago. The heroes who were kind enough to respond to that call of duty would patrol in shifts. The handouts they received detailed their assigned sectors and shift schedules, which would change daily, but they were reminded not to leak any of that information. A hero named Compass Kid introduced himself to his partner, who turned out to be Rock. Compass Kid said his old lady used to say the darndest things like, "That's how you're using your day off. Turn down that hero gig and take the kids somewhere. What good are you really? Just one of the rank and file. And it's not like it even pays well." He said she just doesn't get it, because that was not what justice was all about. Even if their patrol did not lead to anything that day, it was still worth it for the peace of mind they could give the people of that town. Rock replied that it was true enough, so Compass Kid seemed happy that he and Rock were on the same page. He then called Rock a swell fella, and Rock said that patrol was not just about general crime prevention, since they were there as a precaution in case a certain villain showed up. Compass Kid agreed, and said they could not let their guard down. In fact, that day might be the day Pop Step made an explosive appearance, and as he said that, Rock simply smiled. Let's flash back to the memories of young Kazuho, also known as Pop Step. She was watching a show on TV, completely captivated by what she was seeing, a touching reunion with the person who had saved someone that day. Inspired, she called out to her mother and asked who the people on TV were and how they managed to get inside it. She even approached her mom while she was washing the dishes to ask. Her mother was puzzled at first by the question about getting inside the TV, but soon realized that Kazuho was referring to famous people, celebrities, like heroes or performers. Curious, young Pop Step then asked which was easier to become. Her mother answered that she didn't think any of the options were easy. That's why she encouraged her to figure out what she truly wanted and see where it would lead. She told her that she could be a hero who helps people in need or a performer who sings, dances, and brings joy to others. Pop Step imagined both paths and her mother asked which one she thought was better. She smiled and said she wanted to sing and dance. Back in the present, Pop Step was now completely surrounded by bees, seemingly preparing for another attack on Narahata. From the top of a building, she jumped and declared that she was going to try again that day. She smiled and said that she would sing and dance, destroy and burn. And just like that, she unleashed another powerful explosion. Not too far away, Compass Kid introduced himself, saying he was like a spinning compass of justice, spinning round and round. After striking a pose, he declared that he never gets lost. Compass Kid said that was his catchphrase, though he admitted that not everyone had taken it well. Some people questioned if a compass was really supposed to spin like that, and others even said his whole life seemed off course. He reflected that maybe he really had been wandering aimlessly, but now, finally, he had a proper day job at a real company. Because of that, he could now bring food to the dinner table. Rock smiled and said he understood, but Compass Kid insisted that just once, before he finally hangs up his cape for good, he wanted his kids to see how cool their old dad is. Their conversation was suddenly interrupted when the building behind them exploded. And it wasn't just one. Several buildings in the area were bombed in succession. The explosions were caused by bees. People began to panic as a strange interference disrupted the radio signals, followed by an eerie noise. Then suddenly, Pop Step appeared on the large screen above the streets and asked everyone if they had been waiting. She declared that she had returned, and that her second live show was about to begin. A powerful explosion erupted behind her, causing Compass Kid to worry. That was exactly what they were trying to stop. He quickly tried to call HQ to report that the villain girl was there, but his phone wouldn't work. So he ran off, saying they had to help evacuate the people until backup arrived. He called on Rock to come with him. Pop Step, meanwhile, laughed as she saw heroes arriving one by one in response to her rampage. From up above, she said they might be her special guests for the day. She then announced the first song she was going to perform, an oldie but goodie. It was the Americana department theme, titled Inferno. She took a deep breath, leapt forward, and declared, "It's showtime." Pop Step's performance was being broadcast on TV, and all she was singing about were bombs. The Hata brothers were watching the broadcast, and once they realized she had started wreaking havoc, they looked outside to see where she was. Ichiro identified that she was near the main drag, and he figured she wouldn't be heading their way. It turns out that Pop Step's companions were currently at their cafe. They told them to stay put where it was safe and to keep away from the windows. Meanwhile, the Feathers and the Sisters of St. Lila's Academy were worried for their friend. Ichimoku asked what they could do in a situation like this. Someone replied that there were already plenty of heroes on the scene, so this wasn't a place where civilians should interfere. Kamayan added that ordinary civilians definitely shouldn't get involved. Elsewhere, Koichi was outside when he noticed nearby explosions, and it alarmed him. He was still at Knuckle Duster's warehouse and immediately pointed out the situation to Soga. In response, Soga quickly called out to Moyuru and rapped. Koichi threw on his hoodie and gloves, while Soga grabbed a jacket and helmet. Moyuru and Rap climbed into the truck, and according to Soga, they already knew what they had to do. Soga took the lead, riding his motorcycle, while Koichi stood on top of the truck. They were now rushing into action to execute the plan they had prepared for. Back in the city, the damage caused by Pop Step had become severe. The stationed heroes were now in pursuit, chasing after her as she leapt from one building to another. However, because of the series of explosions she triggered, the heroes running on the ground were hit and buried under falling debris from the collapsing buildings. A flying hero managed to catch up to her, but Pop Step easily defeated them by releasing her bomb bees, causing an explosion that took the hero down. She laughed maniacally, clearly enjoying the chaos she was causing. She exclaimed how much she loved it. Meanwhile, more heroes on the ground were keeping watch. Among them were Compass Kid and Rock, who were helping evacuate civilians. But Pop Step wasn't satisfied yet. She said she wanted to kick things up another notch. Panic began to spread among the citizens. They no longer knew where to run, stumbling and fleeing in confusion as explosions erupted around them. Up on a rooftop, Detective Naomasa was watching the scene unfold through his telescope. He noticed that Pop Step was merely toying with the heroes on patrol. Not only were their communications being blocked by the radio bees, but because the response teams were only hastily assembled, She was taking full advantage of their lack of coordination. Someone behind Naomasa asked what that sound was. Curious, Naomasa asked what they meant, and the reply was that awful and sickening noise. He answered that it was Pop Step's song, Inferno. He couldn't believe she actually called that garbage Inferno. Disgusted, he said she had some nerve naming that awful noise Inferno. And so, he'll give her a first-hand taste of a real Inferno. And the one making that strong declaration was none other than the number 2 hero, Endeavor. He was now preparing to take action and face Pop Step head-on. Meanwhile, news had already spread about the large-scale villain incident occurring in downtown Narahata. As a result, the roads surrounding Narahata Station were now blocked by traffic. The driver, Moiru, grew irritated because they got stuck there and commented about the gridlock. Rapthin asked Soga, who was on a motorcycle, what they were supposed to do. Koichi volunteered that he would go ahead. Soga gave him the go signal and said he would just be right behind him. He added that the two would pass through the back streets. With that, Koichi quickly sprang into action, hopping across the tops of the cars on the road. Rapt was surprised by his speed. Suddenly, they heard an alarm and were startled by it. Soga asked what was happening, visibly alarmed by the siren. Meanwhile, Pop Step continued to wreak havoc around the area. A hero from Endeavor's agency then arrived. Compass Kid recognized the sound of the siren, and Rock seemed relieved because of it. Compass Kid explained to the people there that they should calm down because the sound meant that a hero team was about to be deployed. He told them to stay calm and take shelter inside a nearby building. As for himself, he said he would search for those who had not yet evacuated. He moved around the area, asking if there were still people left. He pointed left and right using both his hands and feet. He said there were still a few people remaining in the area. His quirk, Pointer, allowed him to indicate the direction of people, places, or things he was searching for. He then called out to his companion, Rock, to immediately respond and assist those still trapped. The destruction caused by Pop Step had already become massive. Back at the top of a building, Detective Tsukauchi reminded Endeavor that their goal was to capture her and not to forget that. He explained that the fiasco represented the next phase of the instant villain and remodeled villain plot, which had been steadily spreading across Narahata for years. He added that the girl might also be not out of sound mind. However, Endeavor responded that he should open his damn eyes. He said that the vicious villain Pop Step was in charge of a swarm of explosive bees and that she continued to indiscriminately bomb the neighborhood. Because of that, she could be considered a threat on par with a small, well-trained army. A threat like her, he said, called for annihilation through a wide-scale assault. The detective was completely shocked by his statement. Meanwhile, down below, Compass Kid, carrying a child on his back, reported that everyone in the immediate area had already been evacuated. The other heroes deployed around the area, including the sidekicks working for Endeavor's agency, also confirmed the same. Because of that, it was now time to signal Endeavor. The flaming sidekickers took their positions and prepared their flames to send up signal flares. From above, Endeavor noticed the signal. Now that everyone was ready, it was his turn to move and bring down the villain. Even though Detective Tsukauchi tried to stop him from carrying out his plan, there was nothing more he could do. Endeavor activated his quirk and ignited his flames. He raised his hand and unleashed Karmic Rays, Hellfire Storm, his ultimate move. Tsukauchi could not believe the sheer power he unleashed. Endeavor released an intense tornado of fire capable of engulfing anything in its path. His flaming sidekickers were impressed by the move. However, because of it, the fire spread through the streets and affected everything outside, including street signs, motorcycles, and more. From the rooftop, Detective Tsukauchi held on to his hat and thought that the giant whirlwind of flame was swallowing the entire street. He wondered if Endeavor was using the airflow created by the canyons between the buildings. At first glance, it looked like a crude runaway spectacle, but Endeavor was fully capable of controlling it with extreme precision. It was clear that he was trying to keep his cool. He remained intense and focused solely on his targets, which were the bomb bees. Because of that, the bomb bees began exploding one after another. Endeavor stayed calm, steadily cornering his target with the intent to burn it down to ashes. Pop Step grew worried as she found herself cornered, but just then, Mokamiji, or Burnin, suddenly shouted to get Endeavor's attention. Annoyed, Endeavor immediately withdrew his karmic rays, Hellfire Storm. The heroes on the ground were puzzled, wondering why the fire tornado suddenly disappeared without a trace. Even Detective Tsukachi wondered why Endeavor canceled his attack so abruptly. Endeavor demanded an explanation, saying he thought he had ordered the full evacuation of everyone in the area. Frustrated, he asked who the twig of a hero was that was blocking his way. It turned out to be Koichi, who was rushing toward Pop's step. Detective Tsukauchi, observing from above, pointed out that he was not a hero. He explained that he was the Narahata vigilante known as the Crawler. Endeavor was surprised when he heard he was a vigilante. To him, that meant he was a scumbag pretending to be a hero without a license. As far as Endeavor was concerned, that made him no different from a villain. Little by little, Endeavor began to wobble as he started suffering from fatigue. The other heroes quickly rushed toward him, carrying fire hoses to extinguish the flames on his body. They surrounded him as he sat down. Tsukauchi also grew concerned and approached him. He told Endeavor that the sound and the explosions were moving toward their location, so they needed to pull back for now. However, the number 2 hero responded that they should deploy the patrol squad immediately. He said they could not allow Pop Step and the Crawler to escape. Tsukauchi warned that it would be dangerous, but they were prepared to apprehend them this time. Endeavor then asked for 5 minutes. He said that within 5 minutes, he would fire up again and burn everything down. No mistakes. From afar, Endeavor's steaming body could be seen as he gave another signal. The alarm sounded once more, and Compass Kid explained that this particular siren meant it was time to capture the villain. It seemed they were back to square one now that Endeavor had stopped his attack. Rock thought that Endeavor was not capable of continuously using that powerful move. Since Endeavor had used so much firepower, they could expect a cooldown period of about 5 minutes. This meant another flame tornado would happen again in 5 minutes. In that case, Compass Kid thought they needed to capture the villain before that happened, for the girl's sake too. He urged Rock to move forward, saying that everyone was hidden up ahead. However, a bee blocked their path. It was a bomb bee, causing concern. But before it could explode, it was suddenly taken down. Compass Kid and Rock were surprised by what happened. Meanwhile, Koichi sped past them at that moment. The bomb bees were approaching the other heroes scattered around the area, but before they could be blown up, the bees were swiftly neutralized. Compass Kid wondered who was doing it, as someone sped right between him and Rock. It was Koichi, who was getting rid of the bees while still focusing his attention on Popstep. He swiftly slid and glided across the streets, using his shooty-go-blam technique to target and eliminate the bees. In a flashback to his conversation with Soga, Soga had told him that he was not supposed to shoot people, but rather target the bees. Back in the present, Koichi focused on doing exactly that, targeting the bees flying around him one by one. His instructions were to eliminate the bees using his SGKB, or shooty-go-kablum technique, and to slip past the little swarms in order to get closer to Popstep. And so, Koichi did exactly as planned. He pursued and picked off the bees one after another. However, he eventually found himself face-to-face with a whole swarm of bomb bees blocking his path. According to Soga's advice, if he ever encountered a swarm of bees ready to attack, he should use the homemade smoke bomb that Soga had given him. That smoke bomb was filled with pheromones strong enough to attract the bees. Koichi quickly pulled out the smoke bomb from inside his hoodie and activated it. He then threw it toward the location of the swarm. Meanwhile, a few heroes had begun chasing Koichi in an attempt to capture him. But Koichi remembered what Soga told him. If that happened, he should not fight them, but instead use them to his advantage. Koichi leapt over the heroes, causing them to instinctively follow him, just as planned. They were all headed toward where Popstep was located. The plan was that once the bees had taken a hit, the heroes would help surround Popstep. Then, in the very last second, Koichi would grab her and escape from the ring. Rock, or rather, number 6, noticed what Koichi was planning. If that was the case, he thought, all he needed to do was to open an escape route for Popstep. He jumped to the top of a building and pulled out his gun to prepare. Down below, the heroes continued to chase after Koichi, but one by one, they were taken down by number 6, including the hero flying after Popstep. Compass Kid grew worried when he arrived at the scene and saw the fallen bodies of the other heroes. When number 6, or Rock, asked what was happening, Compass Kid replied that it was awful. Those heroes had been shot. As he moved closer, Compass Kid thought that there might be another villain around. Rock responded that it might have been the man who suddenly flew off at top speed earlier, pointing the blame at the Naruhata vigilante, the Crawler. However, Compass Kid was not convinced. When the Crawler had run past him, he had also helped the other heroes, and even Compass Kid himself. Closing his eyes, Compass Kid insisted that the one who attacked the heroes was someone else. He then used his pointer quirk to find out who was truly responsible for the attack. He spun around, aiming to confirm his suspicion. After a few moments, his pointer quirk pointed directly at Rock, which shocked him. But Rock did not deny it. He admitted that Compass Kid was right. Compass Kid was caught off guard when Number 6 suddenly strangled him. They were in an alley when Number 6 lifted him up by the neck. While holding him there, Number 6 told him to listen carefully. He said Compass Kid was nothing but an opportunistic scum who did not care about his family. He just wanted to have fun, so he said his reason was equal to half-assed excuses, and said that attitude of his was exactly what ticked him off. That was why he called him a loser. Compass Kid responded that there was nothing half-assed about what he said. He admitted that his family meant the world to him. Hearing that, Number 6 suddenly smiled and said that Compass Kid apparently had a shred of dignity after all, asking why he had not shown that side of himself from the beginning. It was a shame, he said, that Compass Kid had now seen his true colors. Now, he could no longer allow him to live. Number 6 activated the bomber cells in his arm and suddenly detonated them against Compass Kid's body. As a result, all that remained was Compass Kid's hand, still pointing at his own killer. Number 6 then walked away and said that Pop Step's stage was now fully set. Everyone is there to watch. Meanwhile, Koichi climbed up the side of the building, trying to reach her. Pop Step stood atop a water tank, and now it was time for her final and greatest performance. In the next scene, a what-if scenario of their lives was shown. When Pop Step was asked how her job hunt was going, it was clear from her tired and sleepless appearance that she was exhausted, and she simply replied, "Crappy." The two of them were at Hopper's Cafe, and despite her answer, Koichi just smiled and said, "I see." Pop Step admitted that every time she failed an interview, a part of her soul felt like it was disappearing. She started to wonder who she was even supposed to be. Unbothered, Koichi responded that if worse comes to worst, she could count on him for food. Pop Step blushed at that and was visibly surprised. Koichi added that he'd make sure to cook an extra portion for her. Embarrassed, Pop Step just thanked him. Meanwhile, at the counter, Jiro received a call and told Crawler that a villain was spotted near the station. Because of that, the two of them quickly stood up and headed to the restroom. While getting ready, Pop Step grew irritated, saying they rarely had time to meet up, and now a villain had ruined their moment. Besides, she questioned wasn't he supposed to have retired from that already. As Koichi put on his hoodie, he could only apologize. As they were walking out, a customer noticed Crawler and waved at them. Koichi clarified that there was a new All Might hoodie release again. In Pop Step's thoughts, that could have been their future. She imagined herself as a mother in the future. Her child was calling her and kept repeating something about a bathing suit. Pop Step, confused, tried to figure out what her daughter was saying, then realized she meant bathing suit. While changing her younger child's diaper, she called Koichi honey and asked him to check what Manaha, their child, was referring to. Manaha was holding Pop Step's old costume, which she had found in the closet. Koichi took it from her, surprised that they still had it. Manaha excitedly said she wanted to wear it. Once again, Pop Step imagined that maybe that really could have been their future. Fast forward, when the kids had grown older, Manaha said she wanted to enter show business. However, the more mature, short-haired version of Pop Step admitted she had tried that before too, but pursuing it as a career was a different story. Manaha insisted that it used to be just a hobby for her mom, but she was serious about it now. As they sat on the couch, Koichi smiled and said her mom used to be really famous. Annoyed, Manaha said she didn't want to be a neighborhood celebrity like her. Meanwhile, her younger sibling, who was playing games on the couch, commented that if Manaha really wanted to be famous, she should first find a way to control her crazy temper. She called him Ippo and told him to be quiet for a bit. That was the future Pop Step once imagined for them. However, she had come to accept that no future remained for her anymore. She had already made a decision for herself, and it was time to face whatever consequences came with it. Anyway, Pop Pop Step finally introduced her big surprise for the day. She said it was her new single, titled Bloom. She leapt into the air and released a swarm of bees. She declared that she no longer needed the past or the future. She was giving her entire being for this final song. As she looked at Koichi from the side of the building, she thought to herself that he was the only audience she ever wanted. A flashback followed, showing a conversation between Koichi and Soga. Soga had advised him to pay close attention to Pop Step's songs. Koichi grew curious and asked why. According to Soga, he believed that Pop Step wasn't directly controlling the bees. Most of the swarm, he said, were simply following bug instincts or programming or something like that. There was essentially no one at the wheel. But whenever she started singing, the entire swarm would suddenly switch into attack mode. Moyuru wondered if the song itself was giving them direction, while Rapt asked if it was like a rock-on, be dudes kind of thing. Back in the present, Pop Step had begun attacking, and the swarm of bees was headed straight toward Koichi. He realized that the new song was changing the way the bees moved. Pop Step continued her rampage while performing, leaping around as she sang about what she was feeling. She approached Koichi at the edge of the building, still singing her new single. The heroes in the area grew alarmed as the bees spread out, and the civilians were merely watching the scene unfold. Meanwhile, Koichi was targeting the bees with his shooty-go-blam technique while trying to escape. Pop Step's bomb bees kept spreading throughout the area as she kept performing. From a distance, Detective Tsukuchi noticed that the explosions were different compared to earlier. He said it looked more like a mid-air battle or a game of tag. Endeavor, however, responded that it didn't matter anymore. Once he cooled down, he said he would put an end to the villain's playtime. Over at Hopper's Cafe, the Hata brothers and their fans were listening to Pop Step's new song. Jiro admitted that it probably wasn't the right time to say it, but it was a real bop, and the others agreed with him. Meanwhile, some of the other Narahata performers felt there was something strange about the performance. They said it was harsh and intense, with a hint of sadness and loneliness. Someone even commented that it sounded pathetic, calling it a desperate song. The Feather siblings were shocked by that, and Miyu especially could not accept it. Back to Pop Step, she believed they understood now. Now that her chances at those beautiful memories were gone, and her glorious happiness was out of reach, she said this was the moment she would shine even brighter. She faced Koichi and targeted him. She detonated his hands, causing Koichi to lose his grip on the side of the building and fall. Pop Step simply said bye-bye and declared that her performance was ending there. As he fell, Pop Step said that under the setting sun, she would shatter into tiny shards of glass that would pierce his heart. She was gathering all her bees together, and Tsukachi took notice. This made Endeavor curious whether she planning to blow herself up. Pop Step thought once more about the future. She said she hoped that every time Koichi looked at the sunset, he would remember the girl he couldn't save. She admitted that was her dream, her final hope. As he plummeted toward the ground, Koichi began to think carefully about what he could do. He noticed the grappling hook he had with him and suddenly threw it up toward the building. It caught onto a railing at the edge. A flashback followed. Koichi couldn't believe it when Soga handed him the grappling hook, especially since it originally belonged to his master, Knuckle Duster. But Soga said he should take it with him and just think of it as insurance in case his quirk ever malfunctioned. When Koichi tried it, he struggled and said he wouldn't be able to use it. Rapt teased him, saying that old weirdo Knuckle Duster could swing between buildings using just that rope and his strength. Moyuru agreed, but said Knuckle Duster wasn't exactly normal. Back in the present, Koichi had no other choice but to pull himself up using the hook and use it to leap closer toward Pop Step. He gathered his courage and jumped without hesitation. He shouted Pop's name, which caught her attention. Pop Step suddenly snapped out of it when she saw him and heard her name. Tears welled up in her eyes as Koichi desperately tried to reach for her. She was just about to reach for him too, until a gunshot rang out, hitting her in the chest. Koichi was completely shocked by what had just happened. Down below, it was revealed that number 6 had been the one who shot her. He said it seemed like his dear Pop had lost her grip on her vision, so he decided to give her a little nudge from behind. With a smile, he said he was still her biggest fan, and he hadn't given up on her dream yet. Koichi couldn't believe what had happened to Pop Step. All he could do was scream her name. In his mind, he worried something hit her back. He wondered if she had been shot, and if so, by who. Koichi was deeply concerned whether she was hurt, especially when he saw her just falling helplessly. Because of that, he rushed forward, desperately trying to catch his friend, Pop's step. He used his quirk and boosted his legs to get to her quickly. Thankfully, he caught her just in time before she hit the ground. The impact of their landing was so strong that the pavement beneath Koichi cracked. Gasping for breath, he checked to see if she was still okay. When he noticed Pop's step was still breathing, he thought he needed to get her treatment immediately. Then, someone approached them and greeted him. Koichi became alarmed upon seeing the person and asked if he was a hero. Rock, or rather, number 6, just smiled at him. Koichi pleaded with him to let them through, saying Pop's step was in bad shape and needed special medical treatment. He added that someone had shot her in the back. Still smiling, Rock calmly admitted that he was the one who shot her. Koichi was surprised by what he said. Rock showed him the syringe he had used. He explained that he had shot Pop's step with that tiny baby syringe, which was filled with a drug that controlled the bees. He said desperate times called for desperate measures. Koichi simply pulled out his phone and said that kind of made sense. He admitted he didn't know much about drugs, but he would make sure to bring her to someone who did. He checked to see if his phone was still working. Rock added that the girl wasn't just some ordinary villain. She was cute, but things just didn't seem to go her way. It was like the tale of a tragic damsel in distress. While Koichi was still busy checking his phone, Rock asked, what if the real villain was manipulating her from the shadows and was intent on destroying her? Then, he put on a domino mask and said that was unforgivable. Koichi grew worried as he noticed the shift in his behavior. He began to sweat nervously, saying he was just trying to call someone. Rock's hand began to transform. He declared that he believed the villain here was Koichi, and the hero who would fix everything was none other than himself, O'Clock II. He added that he would beat him down with the fist of justice. Koichi couldn't believe what he was hearing, while O'Clock II just stood there grinning. He asked Koichi if he had nailed his routine or monologue properly. He added that there were 2 reasons why he was droning on and on. First of all, he said that every hero needed a good story behind them, and a villain bound to them by fate or destiny. He was sure that kind of thing was necessary. The relationship, the communication. Koichi tightened his grip on Pop's step and said he didn't have time for this. O'Clock II acknowledged that he was clearly in a hurry, and with that, he revealed the second reason. He was waiting for the drug to kick in on Pop's step. Koichi was shocked when Pop's step suddenly began to convulse. O'Clock II explained that the contents of the bullet were something he called the blow-yourself-up pheromone. Because of it, the bee's defensive instincts would kick in. As a result, the queen in the hive would become eager to self-destruct. Bees began to emerge from Pop's step's body. He clarified that this was a cleanup tool to wipe out the entire experiment, including the swarm and the host. Suddenly, a series of powerful explosions erupted. Koichi immediately bolted, carrying the unconscious Pop's step in his arms. He noticed that the bees were attacking, but he couldn't fight back because he was carrying Pop. On top of that, she had a weird drug inside her. It made him wonder, who exactly was that man? Since he couldn't fight, he had no choice but to escape and find Soga and the others. Elsewhere, heroes could be seen protecting civilians from the explosions, while people inside the buildings and their homes were in a state of panic. Meanwhile, O'Clock II watched the whole thing unfold from atop a building as Koichi fled from the blast below. He said it was the perfect little fanfare for their parade. He wanted Koichi's escape to be as flashy as possible, because once everyone's eyes were on him, that's when he'd make his move and bring him down. He knew there was no hope left for saving Pop, which meant that the tale of the tragic villainess would surely become a legend. He had already imagined everything. The headline reading the sorrowful debut battle of the newest hero, O'Clock II. In his plan, he would capture Koichi just as Pop's step exploded, and as he held her in his arms, he would swear upon her wretched soul that he would never let something like this happen again. That, he thought, would be the perfect theme, his burden to carry as a hero. Him, O'Clock II. He believed no one could resist becoming an instant fan after something like that. Surely, people would accept that story without question. However, he realized that the final act of his plan still had to wait. It wasn't time yet. Koichi was still making things difficult for him. There was no way he could let him escape the patrol zone now. He let out a sigh, then swiftly sprang into action. Using his overclock quirk, he leapt from building to building at lightning speed, closing in on Koichi. He said it was time for them to end this. Koichi was still making a straight run for it when he suddenly glanced back and spotted him. A clock the second was surprised that Koichi had noticed. He commented on how sharp Koichi's senses were. Still, he said, it was too late. He was already within striking range. Just one punch would be enough to bring him down. But to his shock, Koichi suddenly dashed forward at high speed. A clock the second was completely thrown off. His positioning fell off, and he couldn't keep up. Then he noticed Koichi's foot movements and identified the cause. It was the slide and glide technique. The force fields on Koichi's feet were shifting. Koichi then activated his super move, Extra Oomph, to evade an explosion headed his way. As the smoke cleared, a clock the second asked aloud what just happened. Koichi had suddenly boosted out of nowhere. He complained, saying it was cheating to just change the script like that. And cheaters, he declared, must be punished. He rearmed himself, regenerating his arm, and began pursuing Koichi again. While tailing him, he noticed Koichi was cautious of overhead attacks. But he also observed that his reaction slowed down whenever the script was flipped on him. Against someone like that, who could whip out anything at any time, the best way to eliminate him would be with a sneak attack from behind. However, his thoughts were cut short when he suddenly saw Endeavor approaching. Endeavor's hell flame was already lit, and he declared to the so-called villain dirtbags that cool down's over. While staring at Koichi, Endeavor noticed that Pop Step was injured. Because of that, he figured Koichi wouldn't be able to jump around while carrying her. However, that didn't seem to slow down his movement. In fact, Endeavor thought that seemed to be Koichi's specialty. Still, he said Koichi wasn't going to escape him, then called out to him mockingly as that all-might hoodie-wearing punk. Koichi recognized him immediately. It was none other than the number 2 hero, Endeavor. He thought to himself how intense he was, and he could clearly feel the heat radiating from him. Just getting close might burn you. But given the situation, Koichi knew he couldn't afford to stop now. He couldn't waste any time. He had to reach Soga and the others to get Pop Step the help she needed. Behind them, number 6, or a clock the second, thought to himself that Endeavor still hadn't noticed him. Because of that, he figured it would be best to stay hidden for now. If Koichi decided to duck into an alley to escape, that's when he would strike and kill him. But instead of doing that, Koichi, still carrying Pop Step, ran straight toward where Endeavor was standing. The villain began to wonder if Koichi had lost his mind. Seeing this, Endeavor said it looked like Koichi had no intention of going quietly. So he began to launch fireballs at him. One after another, he fired blasts of flame, and Koichi did his best to dodge them all. Number 6, meanwhile, was getting frustrated. If this continued, he wasn't going to get any credit for this. He wondered if he should announce his presence and try to fight side by side with that hot-headed Endeavor. At the same time, Koichi was panicking as he avoided Endeavor's attacks. He knew that if he made even one wrong move, both he and Pop Step would be burned alive. But with no other choice, he steeled himself and convinced himself that he could dodge everything. He believed his plan would work. Koichi kept sliding and gliding to evade the blasts. But just as one nearly hit him, the hood of his jacket flapped in the wind, catching Endeavor's attention and enraging him further. It reminded Endeavor of All Might. He yelled out, asking Koichi if he thought he was hot stuff. Then he slammed his fist into the ground, unleashing a massive explosion. He used his raging assault, Hell Minefield. As a result, the ground Koichi was running on exploded into pieces. Koichi was forced to leap while still carrying Pop Step to avoid being caught in the blast. It was as if the entire road had been turned into a field of bombs. Behind them, number 6 was also dodging the flames released by Endeavor. As he jumped, he realized the attack was mostly at ground level. There wasn't much vertical height to it. So he was confident that a simple hop would be enough to avoid it. However, while still in midair, he noticed Endeavor wasn't done yet. Once again, Endeavor slammed his fist into the ground with tremendous force. This time, the resulting explosion was even more powerful, causing massive destruction all around. Koichi was impressed by his firepower and noticed that because of the blast, all the bomb bees in the area had been destroyed. Number 6, on the other hand, was frustrated by this twofold attack. It both pushed enemies back and forced them directly into the line of fire. Even he was caught by the flames and ended up roasted midair. He knew that a single mistake like this could completely ruin all of his plans. While he was still burning, he spotted Koichi suspended in the air, surrounded by both the exploding bees and the raging fire. He held his breath and saw his energy begin to gather once more around his feet. As a result, Koichi launched himself upward with a blast, soaring into the sky. Detective Tsukauchi couldn't believe what he had just seen from the crawler. Even the other heroes and civilians were stunned. It turned out he could fly. Clearly, no one had expected this. Not the heroes, not the crowd, not even Endeavor himself. Down below, even the Scorch number 6 was shocked by what had just happened. He called Koichi a cheating bastard for escaping while he himself was getting swallowed by the flames. Koichi kept blasting upward into the sky until the energy in his feet finally ran out. He started to panic, until suddenly, Pop Step spoke and called out his name. Still carrying her, Koichi reassured her that everything would be okay, even as the two of them began to fall. While they continued falling, Koichi forced out more repulsion force from his feet so he could maneuver his body midair. On the ground, there was a woman wearing a coat jacket and a headdress, seemingly trying to stay low profile, who spotted them. Koichi swerved in midair, like he was aiming for a landing point, and the woman immediately ran toward their direction. In the space between the buildings, Soga and his friends were already waiting, having set up a huge inflatable landing pad. Before long, Koichi and Pop Step landed perfectly on the pad, with Koichi holding her tightly, and Soga and the others quickly ran over. Soga yelled at Rapt and Moyuru to hurry up because they had to start the dissection right away. They laid Pop Step down on a cloth, and Soga immediately asked for the tools. However, just as he was about to proceed, Koichi stopped him and said to wait, making Soga ask why. Koichi explained that she had been dosed with some kind of drug, which alarmed Soga and made him ask what he meant and what kind of drug it was. Then, they all turned to Pop Step when her body began twitching and blood started flowing from her eyes. Soga grew irritated because he had not expected this, and he hesitated about whether to proceed or not, but he immediately told himself that there was no time to hesitate. Just then, someone grabbed his shoulder and shouted, "Not so fast," grabbing everyone's attention. It turned out to be Midnight, the woman in the coat jacket earlier, who had now arrived. She pointed out that Soga was way too nervous, and that first, he needed to calm himself down. She told him to relax and introduced herself as a pro hero and a friend of Pop. She asked if they were trying to save her, if they actually knew what they were doing, and why they were not taking her straight to a hospital. Soga explained that if they acted too slowly, the bees would attack. He then asked where the bees even were now, and Koichi answered that he thought Endeavor had burned them all away. Soga replied that was good, but the queen bee was still inside Pop Step's body, messing with it internally. Midnight then asked Soga if he meant that the parasite inside Pop Step's eye socket was thrashing around because the drug had stimulated it. If that was the case, she said she understood now, and told them to leave Pop Step to her. Midnight removed her coat jacket, while Soga looked to Koichi for approval. Koichi nodded, so Soga allowed Midnight to take over and thanked her. Midnight hugged Pop Step's body and immediately warned everyone not to breathe for 20 seconds. She then released a special scent. Pop Step's body instantly relaxed, and Midnight explained that she had put both Pop Step and the parasite into sleep. She said Pop Step's metabolism was now at its lowest, so she would need resuscitation and surgery at a hospital. Unfortunately, Endeavor arrived at that moment, visibly irritated at the sight of Pop Step, alarming Soga and his group. As Soga prepared to fight, Midnight stopped him and started explaining to Endeavor that they had already captured the villain. She was in critical condition and needed to be taken to a hospital immediately. Furiously, Endeavor asked what about the other one, the punk wearing an All Might hoodie. Meanwhile, we see Koichi, terrified and hiding behind the inflatable landing cushion. Midnight told Endeavor that the punk had already escaped. Endeavor stared hard at her, trying to see if she was lying, but eventually decided to let them go. He said that something bigger was happening here, and that Pop Step might have answers, so he told them to make sure she survives. Soga then ordered Moyuru to head for the truck, and Moyuru agreed, helping carry the unconscious Rapt. Endeavor kept surveying the area, while we saw Koichi sticking nervously on a wall of a building behind the scene. Endeavor suddenly turned toward where Koichi was hiding, but when he looked, Koichi had already disappeared. Frustrated, Endeavor punched the wall, hitting a pipeline, causing water to spray all over him, cooling him down. Up on the rooftop of that building, Koichi had managed to escape there, visibly anxious. Suddenly, a hoarse voice greeted him from behind. Koichi turned to look and saw the same hero he had talked to earlier. The one who had mentioned his name was a clock. Number 6 told him he was close, but not quite there yet. He explained that the tail of a clock the second had hit a snag before it could even start. It was time to reset, back to square one, and other such nonsense. He said he was now back to being the nameless number 6. Koichi grew worried because number 6's body was badly burned, and he asked if he got caught in Endeavor's attack earlier. Koichi offered to find help for him, but number 6 declined, saying that was mighty kind of him but unnecessary, because his body had a way to fix itself. He admitted that being burned to a crisp was no fun, but he would recover sooner or later. Besides, it was not his flesh that was the problem. It was his very life, his entire existence. Koichi was confused by all that, and told him to just let him find help. A tear started falling from number 6's eye as he stops Koichi and told him to listen. He said that inside and out, everything about him was cobbled together like a craft project, and he didn't even know who he really was. He added that a nobody would risk his life just to become a somebody, and asked Koichi if he understood that feeling, but immediately retracted it, saying no, how could he? He said he had spent years crafting this plan, his grand hero's tale, but it had all been brought to nothing by Koichi, a pea-brained nobody. Still, he said, things were clearer now than ever. He said that trash like Koichi, who destroyed people's dreams, would get exactly what they deserved. He explained that everything about him was fake, made up, and while he might be a hollow shell, the rage he carried was the one thing that was real. He explained that when Koichi would be crawling at his feet, begging for death, that would be the moment when he would finally start to exist, and that would be when the tale of a clock the second truly begins. He asked Koichi if he understood that after Pop's step, he would be the next to die. Mentioning Pop's step confused Koichi, so number 6 explained that she knew too much, and he could not risk spoilers leaking out. He said he had to remove her from the equation for the next phase of his plan to work. First, he would kill Pop's step. Then he would kill Koichi, so he can be the real him. He added that his body had had enough for the day, but he needed Koichi to hear all of that, and encouraged him to meddle all he liked. Still, he vowed he would never give up on his dream. After saying all that, he suddenly collapsed onto the ground, shocking Koichi. Just as Koichi moved in to check if he was still okay, number 6's hand crackled with energy, and in an instant, he used his overclock quirk to crawl away at incredible speed. Koichi could only stare in shock at the blood trail number 6 left behind. In the next scene, a few days after Pop Step City explosion incident, Detective Tsukauchi interrogated Moyuru, Rapt, and Soga. Moyuru said that if he was asking why he happened to be waiting at the spot where Koichi and Kazuho fell, it was pure coincidence. He apologized and said that was the truth. Rapt explained that they were just fooling around with the landing pad, jumping from high places onto it, when suddenly that villain chick fell onto it out of nowhere, surprising them. Meanwhile, Soga remained silently staring at Tsukauchi. Because of that, Tsukauchi explained that they were not being treated as criminals, and that they were well aware that Kazuho was not a typical villain. He asked them to at least give him something to work with. If they wanted answers, Soga said, they should talk directly to Pop Step, and said that hadn't she already come out of surgery. Tsukauchi went silent for a moment, sighed, and agreed, adding that Midnight also asked him to give them an update. After that, we flash back to a point in time where Tsukauchi had just visited the hospital where Pop Step had been operated on. He went through a hand scanner to confirm his identity, was patted down by several guards, and then cleared by a control room that confirmed it was really him and unlocked the door. Upon entering, he greeted Midnight and Kazuho's mother. He commented that the security here was very tight, and it was clear this was no ordinary hospital. Midnight agreed and explained that the hospital was partnered with a security firm, and this facility was specifically designed to handle victims of crimes and other special patients. He asked why Kazuho was being kept there, and Midnight said it was because Soga's group insisted on bringing her here. Furthermore, right after Kazuho arrived, the the hospital received inquiries from unidentified individuals, and alarms started going off. Midnight added that ideally, Kazuho should be transferred to an even more secure and isolated facility, but her condition did not allow it for now. As she said this, we were shown a glimpse of Pop Step's current condition in the hospital. Returning to the present, Sakuichi explained to Soga that the doctor successfully extracted the parasite, but Kazuho still had not woken up, and they suspected there might be some long-term effects. According to Midnight, he said the boys, had saved Kazuho's life. He said he was choosing to believe that, but they needed to tell him something. Where was Koichi Himawari, aka the Crawler, and what was he doing now? Soga answered that Sakuichi surely already knew someone was trying to kill the girl, so Koichi had no time to waste talking to him. Sakuichi grew pushy and insisted that even so, they could not let Koichi just do whatever he wanted. He demanded they call Crawler over to prove his innocence. Soga replied no, and not now. They could not allow their muscle to be arrested. Sakuichi stood up, irritated, and shouted if Soga realized how many people had already died, and that this was no time for vigilantism. Soga followed him and sarcastically asked if all those bodies were weighing down Sakuichi's conscience. He pointed out that maybe if they had actually done their jobs right, none of this would have happened, which caught Sakuichi's attention and left him speechless. Soga then asked if Detective Tanuma, who handled villain-related cases, was around, and suggested they call him into the room. A few moments later, Tanuma arrived and immediately asked what he could do for them. He said they had not formally met, but he probably recognized him from a major case years ago where his mug was all over the news. Soga asked if he meant the business involving Trigger, and added that he's pretty sure the police, realized they were just victims too in the end, to which Tanuma agreed and said that it's the dastardly drug trade that's to blame. But, Tanuma added, he felt something different about Soga now compared to back then. He said Soga was almost starting to remind him of a certain pal of his, which caught Soga's interest. Since he brought up Knuckle Duster, Soga said, they might as well talk about that old bastard. He explained that Knuckle Duster always said the way the world worked, the way it was set up, was like a pair of cheap socks. You wear them, and holes are bound to appear. Even if you swap them for a new pair, they would eventually tear too. That was just how the world worked. There were no perfect socks, Knuckle Duster used to say. And once you accepted that, the only thing left to do was to slap on another pair of socks over the old ones. It might not look pretty, but at least it covered the holes, which made Tanuma laugh. After a while, Tanuma decided to let Soga and the others go, which made Sakuichi protest, asking why on earth he would do that. Tanuma let out his frustration at the vigilante mindset, saying that if official institutions failed, they should recover through proper means and channels. Tanuma said sarcastically if Sakuichi really thought a speech like that would change his mind, and told him to give him a little more credit. He explained that they were not the type who they want making trouble. It was better to pit people like them against actual villains since, clearly, the officials could not always handle everything themselves. When Sakuichi asked what about when it came to thugs like them, Tanuma, lighting a cigarette, said that he was just joking and told him not to quote him on any of that. They both looked out the window and saw Soga, Moyuru, and Rapt walking away from the building. Rapt smiled and started teasing them, so Moyuru stopped this nut job. Sakuichi decided that moving forward, he would monitor them closely, both the boys and Crawler, which made Tanuma comment how uptight he was. In the next scene, Koichi was watching the news on his phone. The reporter announced that Pop Step, the villain girl wanted for a series of bombings, had been arrested thanks to the efforts of Endeavor, the number 2 hero. Currently, she was unconscious and in critical condition while receiving medical attention at a hospital on the outskirts of Narahata. The public response to Endeavor's severe actions was mixed. Some pointed out that she was just an underage girl, while others focused on the massive damage caused by the bombings, leading to a firestorm of both praise and criticism for the number 2 hero. Some heroes who were killed or injured were suspected to have been victims of Pop Step's accomplice. While watching this, Koichi thought to himself that he had always struggled to read the room. He was good at accidentally pissing people off, which often led to him getting beaten up or being told things like "I'm gonna kill you, kid." Still, he thought, that was usually just in the heat of the moment. Once they talked it out, everything would usually be fine again. However, he said that number 6 felt different. He was serious. even though he did not really understand most of what he was saying. He remembered what number 6 said about killing Pop Step first, and then him, and thought, if someone was genuinely out to end their lives, he wondered if he stood any chance of stopping them. In the next scene, he and Soga, along with their friends, planned how they would sneak Pop Step out of the hospital. Soga explained that the entire special ward was now in total lockdown. All entrances were sealed, including the windows on the upper floors. The only way in or out was through the main entrance at ground level. Soga said that yes, they were conducting ID checks inside, but they could not risk a villain getting that far. That was why they would set up their own security checkpoint outside. Moyuru asked what if the actual psycho killer showed up and they intercepted him on the street, to which Soga said that the entrance would automatically lock, the alarms would sound, and the police would be alerted. Moyuru said he understood but was still worried that they might die out there. Soga reassured him that they would not have to fight the guy, they would just hightail it out of there, which eased Moyuru's nerves a bit, while Rapt laughed and called him a big chicken. In the next scene, they started their own security checkpoint outside the hospital. They confronted a man and told him that this hospital ward was for patients in critical condition and that visitors were not allowed. The man tried to explain that he was just there for an AC repair job, but then he suddenly grinned and asked who they were, since it was obvious they were not affiliated with the hospital. Soga made a hand signal, and suddenly, a concentrated repulsion force struck the man's toolbox. Because of that, the toolbox flew open, and they saw a camera inside, making Soga realize that the man was probably with the media. On a building not far from the hospital, Koichi was shown using his quirk earlier like a sniper rifle. Soga explained to him that the man was not actually a threat, but still told him to stay alert, to which Koichi replied that he understood. While camping there, Koichi prepared food and other essential supplies. He thought to himself that number 6 was serious about trying to kill Pop Step, and he realized that if he wanted to stop him, he needed to get serious too.